You love me so much more than I could ever know. Your love is deeper than this world will ever show. And all of life's beauty shines around this moment now. The sky and the cliffs, they seem to change my life somehow. And I will never be the same, will never be the same. Whoa, I will never be the same, never be the same ever again. Well, here I am waiting, Lord, my life is just for you. Please unfold all the plans that you would have me do. And if all the world's just a breath and nothing's here to stay, then all of the love we feel will save us anyway. And I will never be the same, will never be the same. Whoa, I will never be the same, will never be the same ever again.
Hello and welcome to another SDAQ&A. My special guest today is Peter Marks. It's currently 2025, but Peter, you and I are going back in time 5 years, where we will be revisiting the interview I did with you, Season 2, Episode 9. You ready to go back in time?
Thank you, Peter. Yes, I am.
Now, back then, this is Peter 25 still talking. If you're listening on the podcast and can't see us, can't see our aged faces.
Mm,
um, when we chatted back then, your wife Wendy joined us, and also your daughter Ruth-Ellen, and it was a
that's
fabulous
right.
conversation. And just quickly, as people are joining us now, I just want to throw in the little plug for my music. Some of you were just listening to it. And this episode is sponsored by me. So go and click that QR code you can see on the screen, and that will take you to that song and a whole album's worth of music that it sounds very similar, nice and restful and perfect for a Sabbath afternoon, Peter Marks.
Hmm.
So I encourage you to support what I'm doing, everybody. Click that QR code and go straight to the album and listen to it for free. Or you can go to Spotify and just look up Peter Dixon Band Standing at the Cross, and you can find it there as well. Don't forget, love you to subscribe and like the program, whether you're watching it on Facebook or YouTube. That really, really helps. And if you'd like to make a donation to what we're doing, you can go to paypal.me/Peter Dixon Music. And it all helps. It helps me continue doing the show. And, I try and do 3 episodes a week. And currently, as I said, we are revisiting season 2. So today's program is season 2, re-release, episode 9, with Peter Marks. And we will go to that in a moment.
Perhaps you need to explain, Peter, where Ruth-Ellen is.
Yes, I will do that. Good idea. You tell us
And
where Wendy is, and then I'll tell you where
yeah,
Ruth-Ellen is.
Wendy's in the next room.
Hi,
Wendy,
Wendy.
unfortunately, has MS,
Mm,
and her cognition is not as good as it used to be, even 5 years ago. So just understand that Wendy is with me, but she won't be appearing today.
great. Well, say hello and give us her love. And
Thank you.
Ruth-Ellen is a physician.
Ruth-Ellen is doctoring down in Temora in the Riverina. At the moment, she's just locuming for one of her friends who is having some time off. She's in a busy local situation where she doesn't get too much time off. That's her
Yeah,
friend.
yeah,
And so Wendy, Ruth-Ellen is helping her. Hmm.
yes. So that's great. So we will have they're here in spirit, and I'm sure they'll get to watch back and see your commentary that we'll give afterwards. Now, just as a quick bit of background, I'll only be 1 minute just for those.
Mhm.
Some people don't even know when I talk about some of this. It's incredible how Glacier View, Des Ford, the Concerned Brethren, this whole episode is quite easily sunk into the mist. And so that's why I like to keep it out there. And now, like for 5 years, that episode, that whole season was only available on Facebook, and now it's out in the public. So it's out in the general public now. So we're looking forward to it taking off and reaching many eyes and ears. So I just want to take everyone quickly back into the 70s, Post Questions on Doctrine, a book that was released by the Adventist Church essentially to let the other Christians in the world know that they didn't perceive themselves as a cult. You would remember Walter Martin, Barnhouse, some names that are rattling around our memory banks. They were about to release a book which was called, I think, Kingdom of the Cults or something like that. And they were going to put Adventists in there along with the Mormons, JWs, and the Christian Scientists. And when the General Conference guys got wind of that, they thought, we don't want to be associated as a cult or people to think we're a cult. So they met with Walter Martin, and a committee formed and chatted with him and convinced him pretty much that there was nothing to see here, nothing different than the average Christian movement, apart from they kept Sabbath and a few other quirky things like that. Now, I've lost you there, Peter, but I'll keep talking till you come back. But we can hear you, just can't see you. So anyway, post that book, a whole uprising began of people like M.L. Andreessen, who said, hey, that book does not represent us. You guys are trying to rewrite history. And so a bit of a schism began because of that book. Now, the church has had all sorts of schisms and interesting chapters from 1919, 1888, 1851, all sorts of times where the church has come into this kind of potential clash moment. And this one is different in that it kind of brings us to the current issues within the Adventist church, where there is still this kind of divide amongst the liberal progressives and amongst those who want to return to a more historical, traditional Adventist base and doctrinal approach. So anyway, what's interesting is Peter Marks' father, Raglan Marks, was very much as on the side of, hey, let's get back to our roots here, guys. This new theology, these liberal progressive guys are taking us way off track. And so he and a bunch of other pastors, now you might be able to help me here, Peter. I forget when it was, but I'm guessing in the early to mid 70s, they signed a letter and sent it to, I think, our head offices here in Australia, and basically said, look, we're not happy. We feel the church is going off track. And they signed it, the Concerned Brethren. And your father was one of those signees. Can you just verify roughly when that was, when that letter was written? Can you hear me? Check 1, 2. Can you hear me, Peter? Seem to have some problems. Can you hear me, Peter? Can you talk? So you can hear me, but I can't. We can hear you. Can you see me talking, but you can't hear me?
Hello, hello, hello.
We can hear you.
Hello, can you hear me? I can't hear you.
Ah, okay. Right. Okay. So those watching, can you hear me? We can definitely hear.
Hello, hello, hello.
So I'm just checking. We can hear you.
Hello.
Yep. We hear you.
I can't hear you.
I know. You need to press a button. Sorry, everyone. These things happen. Hopefully he is going to come back and it's going to be working automatically. And let's try.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can now.
Oh, so it just needed a simple little refresh like that. I was just giving everyone a background to how the Concerned Brethren movement started, the CB movement. I won't go over that again, but I just wanted to verify with you what date roughly in the mid 70s was he one of the co-signed Concerned Brethren when they sent that letter to the head offices here in Australia, and they were very concerned about the new theology creeping into the church. When was that letter written? Do you remember? That's always something, isn't there? Oh dear. So we'll go ahead with that. I'll give him another second to come in. How are you, everyone? Good to see you all. And let's try again. Trying. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Where for some reason you keep dropping out, but let's keep going while we've got you.
Yeah.
So did you hear my question?
Yes, I did, but I have no accurate answer for that.
Okay.
I just assume that it was in the mid 70s.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. And someone watching may be able to confirm for us as well. So, yeah, those watching, if you can confirm. But anyway, that gives you a bit of a background. And Peter Marx's father, Raglan Marx, was on that he co-signed with about 16 or 19 others this letter. And they were very concerned. The Standish brothers were on that list of concerned brethren. And they
George
began a
Burnside.
movement almost. George Burnside was on it. There are many locals from around
J.W.
here.
Kent.
Kent, yes, J.W. Kent was on it. And they started a movement that really has influenced people right up to this day, and in many ways fueled, monetized, networked, organized. Eventually, people like Doug Batchelor, Ted Wilson back into power. Heartland College was begun by the Standish brothers. I think Weimar was, however you pronounce it, was definitely influenced by them. People like Louis Torres, who influenced David Asherak. This particular group of 16 or 19 men influenced the whole Adventist world, and I would suggest that they even were successful in bringing Adventism back to its more traditional roots. They've all long gone. I don't think there's any signees still alive. Both Standish brothers have gone now. They were the youngest of the group. So we're talking about a pretty historic little movement. And I think they met every week here in Cooranbong at your dad's place or George Burnside's place and regularly got together. So anyway, 2025, here we are, 5 years ago. Peter and myself, his wife Wendy, and their daughter Ruth-Ellen had a conversation about this particular era of time. And we're going to watch that together now and then have a short break and come back with questions and commentary and just to really look at this time period. So I think we're both going right now. Just one last quick confirmation from the audience.
Hello.
Check 1, 2. Yes, we're all live. And Adrian is going to get on to some research for us during this and find out when that letter was signed by the CBs. Darren Pratt, if you're watching, I know you're good at researching that stuff as well. Anyway, Peter, we're going to go ahead now and watch that, and then we'll talk about it afterwards. This just kind of kicks off. I don't think we're even live when we start this one. It's just going. So we'll just play it and see what happens. But thank you for being on the program today. I'm looking forward to our traveling back in time.
Thank you, Peter.
The other thing, so because what are we on live yet, Peter? Or no?
So no, not.
Because I was quite keen when Dad and I were discussing it yesterday. I was quite we were talking about the theology because the stuff that Dad had said in his little list that he was quite keen to talk about was mostly theological, and I sort of said, look, that's good, Daddy, I'm interested in what you have to say, but obviously I think there are two prongs to this from the perspective of someone who wasn't born yet. One is the theological stuff, and then one is the how do people feel, which is kind of what you're talking to people about, and how do we deal with people who disagree with us, and what you're saying is, we should listen and still talk, and are
confused about the theology of both sides. Like after chatting to Ross Cole, after chatting to Lloyd Grolleman, after chatting to a few others, I kind of think I don't think either of you are fully pinpointing the differences here. So I'm keen for the Ruth-Ellen and the Peter version of emotion and empathy and theology all blended together, because I'm trying to tease apart your generation, Ruth-Ellen, where you just didn't really know what was happening. My
Yeah.
generation, which was like, where did all
Oops. I just sent you the Zoom link. I didn't send you the right thing. Hold on. Yeah, exactly.
I've sent it to you, Ruth-Ellen.
Yeah,
I better go live. There's people sending me messages.
Okay.
Here we go. We'll be fine. We'll wing it.
Yeah, but yeah, I think some of those differences between generational things are really good. Anyway, we'll trust you, Peter. And
oh, we're live.
Oh, we're live.
Let me just get my new little thing going down here, which means I can kind of monitor it if people ask questions.
And I've just sent you Dad's message in the messenger. Brilliant. So can I still have a few more mouthfuls before we start?
Go for it. Really I always like to wait till there's 10 people in the room or in the group. And later on, I just edit it all down, and I don't for this wall. Like the SDAQ&A group, as I was saying, has grown from like 220 members to 730 in just 2 weeks. I've got lots of exciting things that I've got planned in my head. There'll be a YouTube channel, a website with the clips in order so people can just watch them. At the moment, you go looking down the wall and you think, where's that one with, I couldn't find today the Kenneth Samples one. And so, hey, those that are joining us, welcome. We're just having a little chat. Ruth-Ellen's just finishing a dinner. We've got Wendy joining us as well, and Peter Marks, and we're going to have a great discussion tonight. And I've been telling them not to say too much because I like to keep it fresh and not plan too much. And we just be ourselves, our authentic selves, We'd never get a job working for some of the organised religious media outlets.
Definitely not.
But that's not to criticise them. I love Candace Thorpe, and all the work she's done with Hope Channel has been incredible. Amazing person.
Did she ever put you on that?
She did. Yes, and I don't think I've been deleted. I think it still comes up every 6 months or so. I get a call from someone saying, "Oh, we can see you singing by the ocean." So so just
I think I've seen you. Yeah.
As people are coming in, just again, just while we're letting people come into the group, it's a private group, SDAQ&A, but we've got big plans. We've got a podcast that's been going for a year. It's got over 22 episodes on it. This series will gradually be uploaded, or as the young people call it, dropped to the podcast. And then we're going to have the YouTube channel, which will be shorter versions of all the talks. But I'll always keep the this Facebook Live as a special place where people can communicate with each other, comment. Like I cannot keep up now with all the comments going on. So if someone wants my attention, they're going to have to tag me. But it's lovely, it's vibrant, and I think it's really important to discuss all things Adventist without fear of recrimination and knowing that we actually all care about each other. So I think we've got about 20 people watching now, so I think we'll just wait for Ruth-Ellen to come back and we'll get started.
Now, you and I go back a fair way, Peter, don't we?
We do.
Because you used to live around in Glenrose, Linfield Avenue, didn't you?
Very good. Yeah.
That's right.
And your dad would drive the buses when I was in high school, and your mum did too, didn't she?
Yeah, she did.
She did for years later. She was a very smart woman, wasn't she? I would sit on the, not saying that Raglan wasn't, he was too, but I'd sit on, I kind of, in some ways, got to know your mum a bit better because I'd sit at the front of the bus there and have conversations with her, and she was, nothing's got past her.
Okay.
Well, let's officially start. So I'll just leave a few seconds so I know when I edit the podcast later. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another SDA Q&A podcast, and now live to Facebook in our special little private group. Lots of exciting things happening. The group has grown from 220 or so to 730 members. There's lots of conversations, and I'm receiving many emails. I've had no negative emails from either side. Some people have said, can you have more people from the right speaking? And I've definitely been trying. I've been trying to involve a lot of women. So you two ladies are our first women on the show. That's fantastic. Thank you, Wendy and Ruth-Ellen. It looks like we might have Iris Yob next week, which is going to be exciting. And
that will be the first time I've seen her in years.
Yes.
so that's very much looking forward to that. And I'm going to be asking Bronwyn Reed to share us some of her insights as well. Bronwyn, if you're watching tonight, you may not realise that, but I'll be messaging you soon. So it's fantastic to have this little family gathering here tonight. We've got Peter and Wendy Marks and Ruth-Ellen, who not too long ago was also Ruth-Ellen Marks, but she's recently gotten married. So welcome, you guys. Great to have you here with me tonight.
Thank you. It's great to be a family here.
That's awesome. And I remember, maybe a couple of months ago, Ruth-Ellen was writing somewhere on Voice or Now or one of my groups, and Ruth-Ellen, you said something about not being too sure about what this kind of controversy and tension was all about. And I remember thinking to myself, that's quite interesting, because your father was one of the your grandfather was one of the signees of the Concerned Brethren, Raglan Marks. And I thought, I've got to chat to you and Peter and get you guys talking so that we can kind of unpack some of it, because your generation didn't really know much about what was going on. You were born in when were you?
1986. It's okay. You don't have to ask.
You're so young. You know, it's not anything to hide. And my generation was kind of starting to emerge into the church then, and we were just wondering where everyone had gone, all the hip pastors and youth leaders. So I guess the whole thing tonight is we want to bring in your elements of understanding to the Glacier View episode in the Adventist Church history. I believe, as did Bill Johnson, that it's probably the greatest crisis that ever hit the church. And I come from an interesting position where I feel like I grasp both sides, and I also enjoyed playing music to Ruth-Ellen's generation as well. Mm-hmm. And I've actually enjoyed all facets of the people in Adventism. I would definitely have called myself more of a liberal person, but I grew up in Cooranbong when Raglan was around with all the other signees, that most of them lived in town, and they were very conservative, but we all kind of got along okay. So my endeavour is that hopefully we can all get along again. I don't expect reconciliation, but maybe there's some kind of healing, and maybe something new can come out of it. So just to kick off, I literally found this the other day. It's a letter, an open letter that Ruth-Ellen, your grandfather, and Peter, your father, Raglan, wrote to...
I enjoy writing open letters too, you know, Peter.
Do you really?
Yeah.
I think I've read a few, actually, Peter. Yeah, have I got my proper glasses yet? This came out in 1987, in February. So, Ruth-Ellen, you would have been one.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought we'd just have a bit of Raglan's voice here tonight. I won't read the whole thing. I think it's 13 pages long. And if you guys don't have it, I'm happy to kind of scan it and send you a copy. But this is one of the original ones that went out. And it's from P.O. Box 96, Cooranbong. Do you remember that box address?
Yeah.
So I'm not going to read it all, but I thought I'd read a couple of things. And I love how he calls the division the 148, because that's their address, isn't it? 148 Wahroonga Road is where the SPD is. And yes. He'll be saying things. So whenever you hear the 148, that's who he's referring to. So we'll read a bit of this, and then we'll springboard into the conversation. So this is an open letter to the administration and members of the SDA Church in Australia, in reply to a letter that he had received from Wahroonga. For years I've tried by myself and with others to wake up those who supported false teachers at Avondale and upheld their doctrines. I've written to presidents and secretaries of the division and the GC and spoken to them and others, but though I wrote to the division president as far back as 1967 and warned him of what Dr. Ford was teaching, that he was rejecting our sanctuary, the judgment, 1844 teaching, and he then quotes from from the Great Controversy, which above all others had been both the foundation and central pillar of the Adventist faith. I thought that was interesting because when I was chatting to Lloyd the other night, he was kind of feeling that maybe they'd misunderstood. And I thought, what an interesting pastor he is, because he's obviously well respected with the conservatives and he has conservative lifestyle approach to his ministry, but his theology, I think, shifting to a more kind of Des Ford, he'll hate me for saying that, view. But back when Raglan wrote this, definitely the feeling was that the investigative judgment 1984 was one of the pillars, and Ellen White had said that as well. Not only a pillar, but the foundation and central pillar. So, and that as a result of this and other teachings of his, many, and I repeat, many students, laymen, ministers, teachers and administrators were losing their faith. My warnings and the warnings of others were ignored. The powers that be would not be warned. They would not investigate. One president even told me when I visited him in his home that he put my warnings into the rubbish bin. I think that's pretty disrespectful. And I think that your father, Peter, was around at a time when, in many ways, they were a minority, but I think now the people wanting to get their church back with the more conservative kind of theology and doctrine are, for want of a better word, winning now. I think your father would be happy with the way things are going now. I'm just going to read one more quick thing. In conclusion, if Avondale or any of our colleges, Longburn, Carmel, Lilydale or other, are to stay true to the SDA faith, all faculty and board members must sign without mental reservation a statement of commitment to our foundational beliefs as required in some Bible colleges in America. See Battle for This Bible, he refers to that earlier. And the new theology teaching that we cannot overcome. This is really important because this is the theology I do want to touch on a little bit later, Peter, because this is the theology that both sides seem to want to say, oh no, we don't believe that, or no, that's of course rubbish. It's not part of the church really. But my upbringing, the Adventism I knew, was very much about this. The new theology teaching that we cannot overcome sin, even if spirit-filled, and that we shall continue to live in sin until Jesus comes. Forgetting, and he lists off all these other Bible verses that confirm that, about 10. So that little point there is a seed in my mind of what true historicist Adventism teaches. It's in the very DNA of Adventism that the new theology was saying was wrong, but he was saying is correct, that we actually can overcome sin if we're spirit-filled, and that we should continue to live without sin until Jesus comes. So there we go. He was part of the group, the Concerned Brethren. Perhaps, Peter, tell us a little bit about your memories of the Concerned Brethren, and then we'll kind of spread the conversation around a bit.
As you mentioned, as Dad mentioned in his letter to the Brethren, I guess that was to L.C. Naden in,
87.
No, but in 1967 he wrote his first...
earlier, yes, sorry, yes.
I'm sorry. And that would have been to L.C. Naden. So Dad was having concerns with Des Ford from the very beginning when we arrived in Avondale again, because he'd lived there in the late 1940s and early 50s until he married my mother in 1952. And he left there and went to Bundaberg, where I was born. And then in 1965, as a 7-year-old boy, I came back to grade 3. And I can remember my mum and dad saying, being rather surprised at the fact that everyone seemed to hang their hat on everything that Des Ford said, and to question nothing, which wasn't Dad's way of doing anything. You know, he was able to question even the mightiest of people.
Yeah.
If he thought that sense dictated that. So he came to have these other concerned brethren, as they began to call themselves, signing off on letters to the division brethren. He came into their fellowship as the only non-ordained pastor of that original group. I have 11 names that I've listed. I think there may be a 12th somewhere, but I can't recollect. And I do know many of them, although not all of them. Let me list their names for you. This will be very interesting. George Burnside, J.B. Keith, who was a union president in the TTUC, I think. J.W. Kent, Gary Kent's grandfather and an evangelist of note. Ruth-Ellen Jones, Frank Braden, Frank Basham, Ron Heggie, Arthur Jacobson, Walter Ferris, Raglan Marks, and Austin Cook. I almost forgot dear old Pastor Austin Cook. But
and the Standish brothers came on board later, didn't they?
Yeah, they were.
Sorry, Daddy. Maybe Peter can edit this out later. But when you turn your head to the left to read off your sheet, you go out of the screen. So you need to stay looking the direction you're in and not move to your left.
Okay. So these were the men who would often meet in George Burnside's home in Wahroonga on a Tuesday afternoon, and they would fellowship with each other, inspire each other, and write letters to the division brethren and to the General Conference.
What were their wives doing?
Their wives were back at home.
Of course.
My mother was driving buses, and my dad would give his shift away and go down to Wahroonga instead.
They were living in reality.
I mean, realistically, this was not an era maybe where there were as many female voices at the upper echelons of the church. But I find it interesting. The thing that jumps to me about that list is that there are no women on the list. They're all.
What's interesting that I've discovered, Ruth-Ellen, is that I'm trying to get women on the show, and I've tried to interview women, and it's very difficult. And a lot of women have said to me when I've asked why, is that they don't want to say anything that would lead to something uncomfortable or controversial, and they're scared of what other women will say because they find the other women will attack them more than the men.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the same as what it was back in the time when Peter's talking about, but it
know.
surprises me that in this era of liberation and equality, it surprises me how silent a lot of the men and women are.
Yeah.
Just let me say something, Peter, if I may, about my mother, because she was in the background there. My mother would dutifully type my father's letters to the brethren, and you have evidence of it in your evidence of it in your pink hands there. And my mother was very skilled and very diplomatic with my father in helping to quiet a troubled mind and to quiet troubled waters around him. and she also had to be careful because she was on the Avondale College board from 1975 to 1980, and then she was promoted to become on the division executive from 1980 to 1990, which, as you note, was 2 terms, whereas lay women were only generally given 1 term, but Scragg in particular appreciated her contribution, and he took her on for another 5 years. So,
did she agree with him, Daddy?
Yes, she did. There was no question about that, but she had a different way of operating. And in those times, I found little to disagree with myself. But I questioned some of the methods of these concerned brethren. And I also note that as far as these names are concerned, they come from all sorts of different directions. Some, like Frank Braden, had a more academic turn of mind. Most of them were retired evangelists, or at least retired missionaries of note. George Burnside, Austin Cook, J.W. Kent, they were all top flight evangelists in their time, public evangelists here in Australia, and had seen hundreds and thousands of people converted under their ministry. And I also want to stress the fact that not all of these men agreed with every point of the doctrines of the other men on that list. So that's important to note as well.
And there's a few names. Someone's just written up OK Anderson. I think he was on the list.
Yeah, that's the 12th. I'm sorry. OK. Yeah, OK was one of the gossips around the place.
And
be careful, Daddy.
This is going out to the world. And Ruth-Ellen, just back to what you were saying, I think that a lot of what I think in this world where we're trying for equality, we're not actually trying to work out something new. I think I'm interested in working out something new of how men and women can communicate in a new way. I think often women might try and communicate in the way men do, and men try and shift and change to appease women way. I'm just generalizing, and I'm coming across as a bit ignorant, but there's I think men often battle out some of their differences in a kind of a robust fisticuff kind of way, and actually not have any emotional feeling of dislike for the other person, if that can make sense. I think women may be more from a consensus kind of view, and I think together men and women can come up with a whole new way. So the era that and I knew your grandmother probably better than Raglan. She would drive my school bus more often, and she was a smart woman. I reckon her IQ was right up there. She could have joined Mensa, I think. And
well, my twin brother did, you know.
Oh, really? And so one thing we'll move away from the list and the mystery of how we can all communicate a bit better, which is something I'd like to explore later. Keep in mind that Burnside had just come from, in 1959, so when I say just, in that kind of era, a series of 22 talks that he did in Christchurch at the Tivoli Theatre, and they packed out 2,000 people a night. So the Adventist message that was this more conservative approach was very popular. A lot of these evangelists, here they are only 5 or 6 years later being told, hang on, there's a new theology. And your father mentions in that blurb there of how almost, I think he uses the word she-devil or demon or something in regards to questions on doctrine. And I've always said that's ground zero for this problem. So he did too, so we agree. So tell us a little bit about what he would have thought, and then I'm going to open up to Wendy and Ruth-Ellen. We'll leave Pete out for a bit, and then I'll shut up too. But what do you think his belief was in the investigative judgment? What's probation? Are we going to stand without an intercessor? What is the real Adventist teaching on that doctrine that eventually led to Glacier View? In his understanding, which would have been agreed upon by a large number of people.
Just let me tell you where his understanding came from, because he was a young man attached to a copra merchant in Rabaul in the late 1920s. And he was converted through reading George Macready Price while he was there. He became, as I understand, the first convicted Sabbath keeper in the whole of the territory of New Guinea at that time. Papua was different from New Guinea at that stage. And so he came back to Australia and went to see the brethren in Sydney. And he said to them, "What do I do next, brothers?" And they said, "Go to Avondale, Brother Marks, and do the ministry." And very obediently, as always, with my father, he obeyed the brethren and went to Avondale, graduated in 1931, and promptly was sent out to Colporter during the dark years of the Great Depression. So his theology had its roots back there at Avondale in the late 20s, the very early 30s. And I think he was majorly influenced by Emil Andreasen.
Mm.
And so the other thing to remember about Dad, or to understand about him, was that although he believed in Ellen White, he didn't push Ellen White as we saw many other Adventist families doing in the 1960s and 70s. Ellen White was there and she was very important, but as far as he was concerned, he didn't really say and do too much about the end times. He wasn't concerned that the end was just around the corner and that we'd have to run to the Wadigans to get away from persecution. He was a bit, he was made curious by that kind of Adventism. And in that regard, he was a bit different from many of his fellow concerned brethren, I think.
So what did he believe, though? I suppose about probation. Just succinctly, what did he believe?
Yeah,
in that last paragraph, it sounds like it's that with Christ's help, we are called to a sinless life. I'm interested in if he thought that.
Yeah. Yes, he believed in character perfection. I'm certain that he hadn't thought about all the issues about the nature of sin so much, but he used often to quote that text which says, "First the blade, then the ear, then the full corn in the ear," as if Christians are growing toward maturity in Christ. And he drunk much from Emil Andreasen in the early days when he'd written his books like The Sanctuary Service and other books. And he thought that was kosher Adventism. And he was a bit surprised when Emil Andreasen was sort of on the outer edge after questions on doctrine. And he was greatly in support of Emil Andreasen when he was shoved out of the ministry and given a bad rap at the very end of his days.
Did that answer your question, Ruth-Ellen? Do you think you've got a better understanding of what... And did you know before that your grandfather was of that more conservative, concerned brethren background?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I knew that he was one of the CBs, I guess. Dad told us about that growing up. And I don't know that I knew specifically that they believed in sinless perfection. At some point, I probably have heard that, but it's not been at the front of my mind. I knew that he was a staunch supporter of Ellen White, although I didn't realise that he was perhaps less so in some ways than other contemporaries that agreed with him on other issues. Yeah, so I guess Yeah, it's kind of fascinating, that paragraph that you read from his letter. You know, the things that jumped out to me were that he thought that correct me if I'm wrong, Daddy, that he thought that the great controversy was a pillar of the faith, I think you read, and that he thought that false teachings were breaking up the church, and that he wanted everyone, which is kind of a little chilling to me in the aftermath of the 2015 GC, and the disciplining of people on women's ordination, for example, that he thought that everyone should be forced to sign a document saying that they agreed with the theology. Like that I completely disagree. Like, if I had been old enough to have an argument with him about that, I would have. And Dad's laughing because he remembers the many hundreds of arguments I had with him on the way to school.
Ruth-Ellen was 9 when my father died.
Yeah.
So she only saw him for weeks at a time. She never...
We went there for Christmas. Yeah, we lived in New Zealand at the time. But and all I remember of him is sitting on his knee, you know, and his big booming voice answering the phone. And you remember 771139. And he was always very kind to us as little girls, and that's all I remember.
He loved you, Ruth-Ellen, because you were his daughter's namesake. My oldest sister was Ruth, and she's the one who died at Kambubu.
That's right.
In 1938.
Tragic.
She died of black water fever. She had a little vision of Jesus as she was being carried to the hospital before she died. Well, she didn't make it to the hospital. She died en route, but from Kambubu to Rabaul. But
those little stories are important because it shows the humanness that we all have as we come to this table. And someone wrote about that perhaps some women haven't spoken up because they don't feel qualified to speak on the Glacier View thing, and I agree. And I hope I haven't come across as telling people off. I sometimes sound like I'm saying you guys should speak up more. I don't mean that disrespectfully. I'm meaning it more as a group, because I've seen the conservative ones so ably speak up, you know, like Raglan would speak up about it, and a lot of people were a bit too scared to. And I think it's a deeper issue than just Glacier View. I think this is something that if it's not resolved, if it's not teased out, if it's not talked about, if the wounds aren't healed, it's just going to happen again in another 60 years.
Yeah, and I think it's really important that we sort of cut to the chase of what it was. I mean, I shouldn't presume to know what it was about, but in terms of the theology, what comes out to me is what Grandad said about what he believed to be the pillars of the faith, and what he believed to be important in terms of how much we should agree. And those are two things I think that you mentioned, Daddy, when we were talking about what we wanted to discuss with Peter, you know, about what the gospel actually is, and you know, how is that relevant to people? And that's what I'm interested in. And obviously my grandfather was also very interested in that, and we may have had different ideas exactly about what was central to the gospel, and what and how that related to people. Maybe Mum can jump in about the important things in the gospel from your perspective, Mama.
Well, I so appreciate our church togetherness.
Wendy has MS, Peter, as you understand, and her speech is a little slurred.
That's 100% fine. We've got all night, and we love you, Wendy, and you just take your time, and we love what you're saying, and don't feel
The interesting thing about Wendy is that your next commentator tomorrow is Wendy's first cousin.
Lyle Heiss.
Yes.
Oh, really?
Mummy, I was interested in what you were saying. You were saying you value the church's togetherness.
I do.
And you've lived through Glacier View and all of this, and you were at college with Des Ford.
And he was my favourite lecturer.
He was. You've said that many times. But what to you is the most important thing about the gospel when you think about it?
Jesus.
Yeah.
Well, he died for all of us.
Yeah. And you know, that's my sister and I have discussed this very often. You know, in loving our parents, and you know, we all have our our childhood hang-ups and our things that we think our parents did amazingly, and our judgmental things we think they could have done better. And I'm sure that if we're blessed enough to have kids, they'll do the same to us.
I can see it coming.
Yeah. But I think that's one thing that my sister Amy Lynn and I have always said, is that we really value how Mum and Dad brought us up that way, that you know, especially you, Mum. Daddy and I would spar over theology and everything, but we, from both of you, we really understood that the most important thing was that Jesus loved us. And I really feel like that was a huge basis of our childhood. It was just that love of God. So I don't remember, I'm sure we argued about whether sinless perfection would happen or not at some point, Daddy, but that was never something that came through ever that I can remember in my childhood. It was always, especially, you know, it was especially from Mum, but it was always just that Jesus loves you. And so that was always my central understanding of the gospel, was just that really simple message that we are born into sin, Jesus loved us, he died for us, he's coming back for us, kind of thing.
And I agree. And the beautiful thread that has come through all of the conversations we've had so far is that theme. Togetherness as a theme that Jesus is central from both sides. So as a kid growing up, I was saying, well, what's the problem then? I'd say to my grandma, what's the difference between the two sides again? And I think that's why a lot of younger people, your generation, go, well, let's just forget about it. Let's just not even talk about it. However, I think it's important to talk about, because it is a point of difference that causes a lot of pain for people. Both sides want Jesus first. One side feels that with the infilling of Jesus, there will come a state of being able to overcome sin, and that is actually part of how we get to heaven. So praise God, through Jesus, that can happen. And the other side is, praise God, through Jesus, we are already saved, and as a secondary thing, our lives will probably show the fruits of that.
Ready, oh, sorry, Peter.
I was going to say, that just seems like a fairly mild difference, but it has caused many hours of angst for people who don't quite grasp that. And for those who thought that you had to be sinless, I grew up in nightmares as a 7 and 8 year old boy. Just have my probation closed. I'll have to live without an intercessor. It's coming back any day. That stuff, as an adult, you can grasp the dichotomy, the differences there. But as a kid, you can't. And so I'm trying to make it that we can talk about it in a way that helps us understand that we are together and agreed on some things, but maybe some things should not be told to kids.
Daddy, because I actually don't know what you think about that. I feel like we haven't discussed it for decades, probably. Do you fall with your dad on this?
Well, I was doing some background reading today of the book written by seminary professors. What's it called? God's Character and the Last Generation or something. And they were saying that there are two ways to think about perfection. One way is to think that when it says in Matthew chapter 5, be ye therefore perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect, that means absolute perfection and sinlessness. Full stop. And they were suggesting that that's more a Greek way of thinking about the issue, whereas the Bible was written to the Hebrew mind, and perfection is an ongoing developing maturity in Christ that can be readily achieved by people in every generation.
So what you're saying is perfection is not a point that you reach, but a process that you undergo.
Yes, like Paul was saying when he wrote in Philippians, was it? He wrote about...
But if it's a process as you go, at some point you're going to be judged if you've come along far enough on that process. So my question is, if you're thinking it's a process, that's a little bit of a sneaky way of getting out of answering the truth about Adventism, is that you have to be more along the process than to get into heaven. It's nice to say we just want to go for the process. We all like the journey, but you're going to be judged if you're not far enough along that process.
Do you think that's true, Daddy?
No.
Oh, I'm glad about that.
I think the Lord understands the drift of our lives, you know. In his books in heaven, he has a picture of our character, however deformed it is at present and however reformed it might be in the future. But the Lord, by his Spirit, will help us.
So does that mean, though, cutting to the chase, that my grandfather or you or others don't believe that Christ's sacrifice was enough for us?
In what way would you believe that about us?
Well, I don't necessarily believe it about you, but it sounds from the way that Granddad was writing that he believed we had to become perfect. But I believe that Jesus' blood is enough for us.
Well, yeah, my father was influenced by the final generation theology of M.L. Andreasen in particular. He thought that was kosher Adventism, and he went along with it.
But you don't?
No, I don't. I have a simpler way into heaven than the final generation, to me, will have the blossoming of the Spirit in their lives, perhaps, but they're not too much different from any other generation, really.
What about? Oh, I don't know. Where do you want to go next, Peter? Because I have more questions.
No, you go for it. This is what I wanted to have happen.
So, yeah, I don't think we've had a conversation like this in many years. But I think, so in that sense then, and we were talking about this a little bit last night, Daddy, and I want to repeat what I said because I thought what you said had some interesting points as well. Because I said to Daddy, you know, we were talking about this, and I said to him that the whole heavenly sanctuary thing, I remember learning about it, you know, as an 11-year-old studying for baptismal class. And, you know, I've read The Great Controversy a couple of times in my, once when I was 10, I think, and another time when I was 15 or 16. And I loved it. I've always loved The Great Controversy. But I guess now, after, you know, 20 more years of life, probably nearly after the last time I read it, and, you know, going through some pretty horrible things, and also, you know, finishing medical training and seeing a lot of other people's lives and horrible things occur to them and having to be there in the middle of it, I just don't have the same questions anymore. And, you know, when you think, you know, I too have just been diagnosed with MS like Mum has, and I have a lot of colleagues at work who are asking the questions, you know, why are you suffering? You know, you're such a kind person, all those sorts of things. And you have these people look at you and say, that's not fair. Why would God let someone who loves him go through that? You know, these are the kinds of questions my colleagues are asking. And these are the sorts of times when I have an opportunity to speak about God, because people expect a sick person to speak about God, you know. And they're asking those kinds of questions about pain and suffering. You know, Ben and I are a bit involved with the juniors in our church, and those kids are asking questions about evolution and the beginning of the world, and can we trust God, and is he real, you know. And I just don't see how 1844 fits into any of those big questions there. And what I said to Dad last night was that I'm after a relevant faith, and for me, if I never thought about 1844 and the investigative judgment again, it actually wouldn't affect my faith. Therefore, why do we have to discuss it? Why is it relevant?
I gave you a short answer last night, didn't I, Ruth-Ellen?
With the short answer.
It seemed to pique your interest a little. If I could come at that again, because in the last 5 or 6 weeks, I've been reading a little ebook written by a guy you need to get hold of, Peter. His name is Marcus Torres.
Is he related to Louis?
I don't know, but he's ministering in Perth. He has a distinct wish to minister to the secular mind, and he's written an ebook called The Death and Rebirth of the Investigative Judgment. And I'm only halfway through it, and I haven't really understood all the ins and outs of it. But people such as Ty Gibson give it the thumbs up, and also Clifford Goldstein. He said, "What did
it say? What's a summary of what it says?"
Yeah, the summary is that he likes the. He sees nothing wrong in what we've said about 1844. It's an accurate Bible teaching, and the investigative judgment certainly is there in the Bible, in the book of Daniel in particular. But he goes beyond that and tries to reframe and repackage the whole doctrine so it becomes relevant. And this is his word, so it becomes relevant to the secular mind and the postmodern mind as well. So his way of thinking about the book of Daniel and of the judgment in particular is that we need to think of God dealing with the suffering in the world. And in the judgment, God is deconstructing human empire. That's his one of his key phrases. He's deconstructing human empire. And yes, if you want to learn more, Peter and Ruth-Ellen, you need to read the book and have him on the show.
No, I mean, I think that's a valid thing to say, Daddy. It's just maybe I'm too simple, but if it can't be explained to a little kid, do we really need to know it?
I think I'm really glad you've raised this, Ruth-Ellen. I think the reason we need to talk about this is not so that we can make it relevant, but so that young people like you aren't constantly, the next generation is going to be faced again with trying to make it relevant again. You're right. I believe you can live your faith. It won't affect it at all if you said nothing happened in 1844. My humble belief. I'm speaking with a father present. I don't want my girls being told anything. So this is my opinion. I think you can live totally going, nothing happened there. Can we put it out of the picture? And I think that's what Des Ford was saying. He was saying, look, this is not substantiated by the Bible. Anyone that tries to make it fit in the box just can't. You need to realize that they had a big disappointment. They wanted to desperately feel that something special happened. They'd put their whole lives into this. And so out came this kind of idea. And they found with cherry picking that it kind of worked and it looked good. And if God had come back in a month, it would have been perfect. And they really thought he did. He would. So the reason I like to talk about it and bring it up again and again is that I think people need to know that instead of trying to write books that make it seem more palatable or that something happened, that there was just no need for it at all in the first place. And I'd just be interested in Peter's thoughts on that, because I'm kind of saying I don't believe anything happened. What significant thing happened that you need added on to what the Bible's already saying about judgment and heaven and a relationship with Jesus? Why do we need that extra little thing that the further time gets apart from that date, it seems more and more irrelevant?
Let me come at that.
With your opinion.
With my opinion. The book that I'm referring to says that we should teach the doctrine at 3 levels. The first level we should teach to those before they're baptized. Just a very simple way of presenting the doctrine of the sanctuary and the fact that judgment comes at the end of human history. And then at the second and third level, we should go a little deeper. And the third level is to provide the relevance for the doctrine.
But
Now,
shouldn't the relevance come first? Why bother learning something if it's not
Because
relevant?
you'd think it was crazy if you taught it first. You've got to ease people into it.
uh,
What is the relevance?
Like,
of-
I can't teach my medical students anything unless they understand how they're going to use it. And that's why we changed the curriculum from being anatomy and physiology and pathology and pharmacology to being all integrated into a patient-centered approach. Like, if you learn all the basic sciences on their own with no context, you forget it all. And that's why medical education has changed. And I would argue that theological education needs to do the same thing.
well, I'm sure Avondale have come more to this problem patient-centered approach or pew-sitting approach to doctrine. But I was trained at Newbold. My major was in systematic theology. I happen to believe in the doctrines of the Bible, in the doctrines of the Adventist Church. There are one or two things in the 28 fundamentals that I would rephrase, particularly in the fundamental about spiritual gifts. But on the whole, they do a good job at summarizing things, and I together with this guy have no problem in seeing the timeline rolling from 457 BC right through to 1844, and
So
I have
what's the
no problem
relevance
in.
of it? What's the relevance of it then?
Because
So
if you-
we've gone through all the stages and we're at that point where he's going to now reveal to us, I can now tell you the relevance of 1844 and the investigative judgment. How is it relevant?
Well,
Like
if
if
you
you
look
can
at
come to it as a date by looking at different historical events and predictions and prophecies, but what's the relevance of that specific teaching?
no, if you look at Daniel 7 with the 4 world empires, the end of all that is the downfall of the Roman Church in 1798, and that, as far as the Lord was concerned, was a close of probation for the church in a sense. And then we move to the judgment in 1844, and God is wrapping up human history. He's deconstructing human empires, and that the judgments of God are falling on the earth even before he does come. And that's why we've seen such an upswing in problems and terrors and panics in the earth. But
The Bible already talks about that, though. Like that's not unique to 1844.
Daniel 2 even talks, and then there's the wars and the rumors of wars in Matthew 24 and all that stuff. But Daddy, what you said to me last night was that, which look, I liked. I have to say, Peter, just so you know where I am, I don't think about this doctrine, so I don't know if I agree with it or not. And that doesn't bother me. So that's where I'm at on it. I don't disagree with it specifically. I don't agree with it specifically, but it doesn't affect my daily life. So I don't see the need to jump off the fence.
I encourage people to see it and look at it and research it, because what I see, being an observer, is that new generations of young kids grow up getting affected by it. Even my little girl has come home, Renee, in tears, and I'm sure she didn't get it from her classroom, but there would have been a travelling kind of itinerant evangelist that came to school and had a little word in her ear, and she was trying to work out how she can be saved, what her sins are. She needs to remember what all her sins were. This is now, and I'm not an Adventist anymore. People need to research this, not for their own, oh, well, I don't really know about it, so I'm not going to look into it. It's because if we don't look into it and come to some clear conclusion, there's going to be generation after generation of young people waking up having nightmares and women being suppressed.
Well, I'll address that in a sec. I suppose what I liked about what you said last night, Daddy, was that what you understood that Jesus's ministry in the heavenly sanctuary had something to say about suffering and about Jesus standing with us in terms of, I guess, solidarity and, reaching into our lives to make something happen in the space of, moving towards the end of time where God will end suffering. And that there might be, is that what you said? Is that right?
Well, human empires and human power is the cause of all the suffering in the world, isn't it? So the world empires of Daniel chapter 2 and 7 and 8, they're all persecuting powers bent on the destruction of God's people.
See, I would disagree. I would say that nature has caused as many disruptions as empires have, and we live and fall and die from nature and power and just people, wicked people and good people, and a big melting pot that seems to be ongoing.
The other thing, Daddy, and that's, I agree with both of you, well, in that I think empires have caused a lot of drama and disaster, and also just the nature of living in a sinful world that's fallen has caused natural events to happen, has caused random tragedies to happen, has caused global catastrophes in the weather patterns to happen, has, obviously global warming is a result of human stupidity. But there's other things that can't necessarily be predicted. But like landslides, for example. But I suppose what I am thinking about is, is there a relevance in terms of the big questions of this doctrine? And then secondly, even if there isn't a relevance, I suppose for me, as I alluded to before, I never had that fear about being good. I don't know why we skipped that. Maybe you guys were just good parents, and I didn't get unlucky enough to meet any itinerant evangelists. It may have been said somewhere in church, and I just didn't listen to it or missed it, or it didn't affect me or something. I don't know. But I never had those nightmares. I never felt like I had to be good or God wouldn't love me.
Well, I didn't either, Ruth-Ellen, and therefore I would have found it difficult to impose that on you when I had never had it myself.
But it's interesting that you didn't have it when you were the son of one of the original 12 CBs, So
you never feared for your time of probation having come up, Peter, in a dark moment of concern?
I didn't either. I mean, I remember learning about the close of probation and just accepting it as gospel truth, but about the time, but I don't remember feeling scared about it. I don't know why that is.
Would you agree, though, that might be an exception to the rule?
I don't know. I mean, in terms of I know it would be an exception to the rule in terms of people who grew up pre-1980. In terms of my contemporaries, I don't know. I have to ask my friends. I'm not sure.
Many of my classmates would have been preparing to run for the hills, but not my family.
We just laughed about it. Like, I remember laughing about it a lot when I was in, Sabbath school as a teen and stuff. Like, we'd laugh about the cans of nut meat, and, it was kind of I don't know, I think we sort of had an inkling that Glacier View had happened. Like, Mum and Dad spoke about it when I was growing up, and I think we had an inkling that there had been unrest about it, and that this perfection versus non-perfection had been a big issue. But I think, I was super blessed to grow up not only with the parents I had, but also the era that we were in, like the late 90s, early 2000s, when I was a teen, was the heyday of people like you, Peter, and people who had that more kind of open, chilled approach, and
we purposely wanted to protect you from that.
Yeah, we did a good job.
In fact, in the early 90s, a group of 32 of us were concerned, and we were men and women, that we did not want what had happened to us to happen in North New South Wales. And we were youth leaders and musicians, and we literally had a meeting at Yarrahapney, and I wrote down everyone's name, so maybe we should find that. We wanted to focus totally away from that stuff.
Yeah, and I think you did a good job. And there's still people in my generation, plenty of them, who left church for various reasons. But the ones who stayed, I think, have a really balanced view of the love of God.
What concerns me though is that with the compliance document and with your dream, the dream that Raglan had, that a sort of a church that had standards that the leaders had to sign up for would come to play, is coming to play.
Yeah.
I think that era that we talk of the late 80s, 90s, early 2000s, is like you made a joke the other night, Peter, or whether it was or not, that your father funded the Concerned Brethren movement, and he did. He was a very, very astute businessman, and he had a clear, concise brain with business. And
yeah, my mother was in the background somewhere there too.
Oh yeah, believe me, I know that. I learned a lot about business from your mother actually in chats with her. Went long after I was at school, and even long after I'd graduated. Actually, we'd bump into each other.
Yeah.
But the Concerned Brethren movement, which I believe every single independent fundamental ministry has ties back to Heartland, to the Standish Brothers, to the Concerned Brethren, to the gatherings that happened in Cooranbong at Burnside's house.
Yeah.
They have strands going back to that, and the whole way through they've been monetized, organized, focused, and they are achieving the goal that they set out back when Raglan wrote this. He would be excited about the developments. I'm not excited about them, but I loved your mum and Raglan and lived in Cooranbong and had haystacks together occasionally.
Well, I don't know so much, Peter, because I think the compliance regime will die with the demise of Ted Wilson whenever that happens.
There's a lot of
You think
grassroots support for
the
it, though.
Concerned Brethren movement will die when he leaves?
No, well,
But the document's in writing, it's in policy, it's in play. The leadership is way, like, we're no longer in the Jan Paulsen era where the Liberals had hope. This is these guys are getting their church back clearly and demonstrably.
I don't necessarily agree that will last forever, though. But what I'm more interested in is, Daddy, whether you think there's room for people. So if you believe in the fundamental Adventist 1844 doctrine, and I don't have a problem with that. But do you have a problem with me not being sure, or with Peter not believing it, or other people not believing that as one of the 28 fundamentals? Can we still all be Adventist if we wanted to be?
Good question.
Well, I tried, Ruth-Ellen, I tried to teach you about it on many occasions, but...
I'm not saying I disagree with you. Don't lose hope. I'm just saying, if I didn't, would you still think I could be a good Adventist?
I still think you're teachable.
Okay, let's say I decided I disagreed with you. Would you still think I was a good Adventist?
Would her salvation be in jeopardy?
There are many things you disagree with me on, and I've trembled for you sometimes about them. But
do you know? Because I've accepted the sacrifice of Jesus for my sins. Why should you tremble for me?
No. I tremble about some ethical issues we come to blows on.
Yes, Daddy, I know we do. But the fundamental question is...
Yeah, what about, back to this one?
Would you take my membership away from me if I told you I absolutely did not believe in 1844, if you had the authority to do so?
What I really believe strongly is that the Spirit of God is given to draw us together and to enlighten us as far as the truth is concerned. And if we are equally as eager to learn the truth and be enlightened, we will come to some common understanding. That's what I believe.
But you didn't answer the question. Would you kick me out now, or would you just keep believing I was going to change my mind and therefore you wouldn't, or would you just keep me whether or not I changed my mind?
Well, the Adventist Church is very biblical in the fact that it allows the local church members to do the deed for me.
So you would hope that Pastor Steve would kick me out of Coast Life? Is that what you're saying?
I would probably have a word in his ear and ask Steve to have a word in yours.
So you do think that her salvation would be in jeopardy if she let go of the 1844 belief?
Well,
Just a yes or no will do.
I find it hard to give a yes or no, because I like to think about some people's Christian experience, or all of our individual Christian experiences, as an ice block. And some ice blocks are with straight edges on them, and others are half melted and half disappeared, blown to the wind or whatever. But
Raglan would have said, "You're in jeopardy, Ruth-Ellen, if you let go of that belief."
I know, and I still don't know if my father thinks I'm saved or not.
Well,
switch it to me if you like, Peter, because then I know there's more of an emotional connection with your daughter. I publicly, I left for two reasons. I no longer believed in 1844, nothing to do with Des Ford. I came to my own conclusion before I'd even really studied what he was teaching. Okay. And because of, I don't want to bring my girls up in a place that continues after decades and decades and decades to suppress women with the no vote. Particularly, ironically, that Ellen White set up the unions with such a wonderful way that would stop this kind of global kinglyship that's happening. So, is my salvation in jeopardy because I don't believe anything happened of a supernatural nature in 1844?
Well, let's talk about church members, individual church members. They each put their hand up to believe in those things, subject to their when they're baptized. So at one point in their spiritual journey, they have believed in those things.
I was 11. I just wanted to be with Jesus. I had no idea what 1844 was about. I knew that somehow if I put my alignment with Jesus as a little boy, I might be saved from these horrors that were about to come upon me, like soldiers turning up at my doorstep and taking my mum into prison and stuff that you didn't seem to worry about. But
yeah, I mean, I knew all that stuff, but I don't know, for some reason I didn't get all the nightmares. I used to tell my sister these. Maybe Lynn will have wonderful memories of this if she ever watches this. I used to tell my sister heaven stories. That was our favourite thing to do when we shared a room, was that I would come and lie in her bed with her and I would tell her stories about, and they would always be about that stuff, but it never seemed to come out as nightmares. It would be the soldiers coming and, the world going, absolutely nuts, and, the end of time happening. And then all of a sudden we would see a cloud the size of a man's hand and Jesus would be coming and it would fill the whole earth and we would be rising up into the air and mum and dad would be there and we'd be there. And, and I would tell her the same story over and over again, and she just loved it. When she couldn't sleep, she'd say, Ruth-Ellen, tell me the heaven story, and I would tell my little sister the heaven story, and we still have lovely memories of the heaven story. So I don't know, Daddy, I'm not trying to, I'm not trying to back you into a corner to tell me whether or not you think I'm saved, because I think I'm saved, so I don't really mind what you think. But I do think that there's room.
I'm not your judge, Ruth-Ellen.
I know.
I'm not your judge.
But you want to see her in heaven.
Yeah.
Yes, certainly. And I want to see you there too, Peter. And I just hope you hang on.
Well, he is, and I think that looks different for different people.
Yes, I concur with what Lloyd said the other night. We want you back, Peter. We want you back.
I'd like him back too, because I happen to think it's better to fight from the inside. But I mean, we've agreed to disagree on that. I still think Peter's wonderful. But I think that it's important for us in the church, and this is where Pete Dixon, not my dad Pete, but and I disagree fundamentally, is that he thinks there's no hope. Well, that's not fair. He thinks that we need to split, and he thinks that there's no way both can coexist, and he thinks that the Adventist church belongs to the fundamentalists, and I disagree. I think the Adventist Church belongs to all of us, and I think we should fight for that to happen. And that's what I like, Daddy. I can see that you have tendencies towards thinking that we should all fall into line with the 28 fundamentals, and that is the Adventist Church. And you may be right, and Pete believes that too, and he may be right that that's, you know, the fundamental box that we have to fit into if we say we're part of this church. But I think there's room to disagree.
And can I
Just let me refer to a little story,
Okay.
if I may, Peter.
Yeah, can I just say one quick thing before
Sure.
I forget? When I spoke to Ross Cole the other night, one of the reasons I wanted him on the program is because he did shift some of my thought. I do now think that the birthright does belong to the Ruth-Ellen side, the more liberal side, as well as the more conservative side, because of question on doctrine, because I do think that painted a different path for a progressive Adventist to follow. And if we follow the question on doctrine kind of path, which allowed room for the new theology, I can embrace that. And I think that those people that did embrace it do have ownership of the church as much as those that would prefer questions on doctrine to not have come out. And that was a big shift for me, because prior to that I was like, no, it's all birthright, give it back.
Yeah, and I can see that point of view, and I'm glad Ross sort of and yourself kind of reached a conclusion that it's possible, because I consider the Adventism that you guys made for us in 92 or 93 by all getting together and deciding you didn't want us to go through what your generation had gone through. Like, that era of Adventism in Australia was just as real as the era that came before and the one that's happening now. And I suppose I'm wanting to see the pendulum swing back that way, obviously. But I do think that Dad and I can disagree on 1844 and still believe in the beauty of Jesus' sacrifice, and still believe in, you know, Sabbath, and still worship at a church together and listen to somebody unpack Romans. Like, I don't
think we can.
Yeah.
I think that's the thing. That's the difference.
And Daddy may not think we can either, if you think I absolutely have to believe in 1844 to be a proper Adventist.
I think we can still socialize. I think we can still hang out. I think we can still have conventions together. I still think we can break bread together. I still think we can love each other. I just don't think we can do theology or church politics together anymore. It's killing our kids spiritually. It's spiritual abuse. I think we need to either separate or form something very defined within, so that there's a defined... I don't mean people have to say, well, I don't believe the Liberals now have to say this is what I believe as well. But there's definitely a general quantifiable two different churches in one already. And we're just trying, that was my thing. I gave the best years of my life to make that work together. And whether Peter and I disagree or not, I love Peter and Wendy. Like, you guys are awesome. I've said before, when my girls were born, I literally, when Ruby was born, my second daughter, I was like, boy, I hope they turn out like, Amy and Ruth-Ellen. So,
well, I grew up in your house.
I can love you guys and just go, but we just, theologically, we just cannot work as a team anymore, because when I ride on your horse, it's got one leg not going the way I want it to go, and I try therefore to kind of add a cart to the side, and we hobble along. We're just hobbling along together. We've got to define ourselves in some way, have a subset, but we've got it, because I promise you, it's never going to change. It's the DNA in the church is going to keep this crisis coming back and back and back. It is not going to change.
Just let me tell you a little story that might illustrate some of this, what you're saying. In about 1987, I travelled with Billy Leonard, a fellow student at Newbold, and Andrew Mustard, one of our lecturers, Dr. Andrew Mustard. We travelled from Newbold to Gloucester one Sabbath morning. Billy was to preach, and I was to assess him as a seminary student. He was still a college student, and on the way we started talking about women's ordination, etc. And Andrew Mustard said something that I've always remembered. this thing is not a conservative versus a liberal thing, because there are people on both sides of the issue who think both ways. Yes, and even Arthur Stella, the night of the vote in 2015 at San Antonio, was heard to say to the press gathered there that one way of solving the issue of the ordination of women had been voted down, and now we had to look for another. So that's how a vice president of the General Conference was thinking, and I've communicated with others in a similar position, and they believe with me that we can still make progress.
Well, Ellen White came up with the
progress
ideal
with Ted Wilson or with his with G.T. Nung.
Ellen White came up with the perfect solution because she realized, like you and I, that people in different parts of the world aren't going to all agree. Like, I'm not saying that liberals have to come to a consensus at all. I think there's a kind of person that goes, you know what, I'm seeking truth, and there's a kind of person that says, oh, and I have truth. And Ellen White knew this well ahead of time. Over like, I think 1903, I can't remember, but the unions were set up to deal with this very issue. She knew there would come a time where some parts of the world would say, for example, women's ordination, would agree with it, and some wouldn't. And they might be liberal, they might be conservative, nothing to do with that, just a cultural thing. So she set the unions up to look after and oversee those differences around the world. But
the problem is, Peter...
That's a brilliant idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. The problem is that there are many people in the world today who believe that the question of ordination is, they're the ones on the right, and the ones on, if we like, believe that it's an ethical issue. So you're having this push-pull between people who believe that it's a doctrinal issue,
and that's why they should split, because it's hobbling us. Imagine the power of Adventism. Mark, the Nouveau Adventist, that's the kind of the Des Ford post-glacier view, excited about the questions on doctrine theology, unhobbled, racing to the kingdom. And imagine, and I would love to go to the other one as well, the more conservative view, historicist Adventist, going to 3ABN conventions and functions and powering on. Adventists spend so much time either conflicting over this or going, I don't even want to study it. Come on, guys, it's all up to God and Jesus. Let's just focus on that, okay? And kind of put their head in the sand. Let's just put an end to it, love each other, but really empower both movements that are within this big movement to set sail with the full impact of God's wind blowing into their sails.
And if we did that, would you come back and join us?
Not the version that you've got. I would come for conventions. I listen to more 3ABN than my wife likes.
Yeah.
I love that stuff. I look, my campfire songs is all old hymns and mellow. I love that stuff. But I think as a political, theological, doctrinal movement, I would not come back to that one.
I just think I don't see how dividing would actually benefit us, because I think it would be so difficult to work out, right? Because you lose the Conservatives lose most of the North American division, right? And that's especially the West Coast, and that's where the church is based. They lose Europe, Northern Europe. They lose most of Australia.
They don't care. They want us gone. Raglan would be here right now, and if he knew how to Zoom, and he would be saying, we do not care. We don't care. Like, one of the concerned brethren was like, I think, was it 700? We don't care if 700,000 liberals leave. We just do not care. And
I still object to the viewpoint that the church belongs to them. I object to that, because historicist Adventism isn't the only Adventism. Exactly. And I think we've demonstrated that by our own lives. And that's what I say to lots of people who think, even my own husband, who's new to the Adventist Church has sometimes wondered why it wouldn't be easier for us to be somewhere where people are more accepting. And my response to that has always been, and will always be, you know, I love our church, and as long as you're willing to stay and help me make change from the inside, then that's what we'll do. And that's my position. And thankfully,
why do you have to stop loving it though?
because, well, it's not about stopping loving it but deliberately needing to leave. For me, church is more about local church, and our local church is fantastic. And our local church happens to be part of the wider World Adventist Church. So as long as I have a local church to go to that I can worship in, and that I feel I could invite people to, and that I agree with the majority of the things that are taught there, I don't have a problem staying. And
I 100% support whatever anyone decides to do.
yeah, and I think, you know, we've got kids in our church, and hopefully our own kids someday, going to conference run summer camps, you know, junior tents, big camps. We can have an impact on all of that stuff. It doesn't have to have that direct connection to the historicist Adventist debate that's going on at the GC, or, you know, we can have an impact on what's coming out of the mouths of our youth directors by how we respond to them. You know, we don't have to roll over and play dead or walk away. As I said, I have full respect to you for doing that too. I think your ministry is amazing. I just want to be one of the ones that keeps things safe from the inside, for those that don't want to leave. And you know, there's a demonstration of that. We probably shouldn't get into this discussion, but in some of the ethical issues my father and I fight about so often, I think there are different ways to look at things, and I think that those ways should be acceptable. And if there's no voices in the church that are saying that to the kids who don't have the option to get out while they're 10, who's going to look after them?
I agree. My theory is that they still can be, like my girls go to Avondale. I'm immersed with people in the community. It's not just when people go to church.
No, true.
And my main concern is I feel like I'm seeing this, I'm the harbinger of something I can see coming over the hill that I'm frustrated that no one else can see, that the people go, the local church is great, but coming over the hill, we've had 6 unions warned. 2 of them were supposed to be reprimanded. The post-reprimand is sanctions. That's going to trickle down to union leaders going, I don't want to rock the boat, I'm going to tie in with this document. That's going to go down to conference leaders, to church pastors, to the grassroots people. And eventually you'll be there, and a whole bunch of other people that I know, great people that are brilliant people that are watching this, that are involved with their church to do what you're doing, to provide a safe place for the people that are there. But eventually you're going to get under so much pressure that, and look, I hope I'm wrong.
You know my solution to that, Peter.
Yeah.
What?
With people, with unions being sanctioned and all, if every union that believed in women in ministry and believed in commissioning them or ordaining them, or whatever word you like to use, I don't like the O word actually myself, but if they all decided to move together and do it tomorrow, then the committee, the General Conference Executive Committee, wouldn't know what to do. So say that 70 unions out of 130 decided to move ahead and tomorrow.
Great idea, but it's not happening.
Why not, Daddy? You should write letters. You can write open letters like Granddad.
I did.
His letters have worked.
Yeah, but
But
I was in England when
letters
he
won't
wrote that
work.
one.
It's too late. There's too much. It's too late. Like that. I think if you and I had this chat 10 years ago, I would have said, man, let's do that. Let's put a bomb under these guys, because there's going to come a time when there's so much pressure. I could see it coming, and I'm not even a smart person. I could see the politics going on behind the scenes before the no vote, that there was maneuvering to get the no vote. And I said I've got it on Facebook, I said, that is going to be no. No.
Well, I wrote an open letter reviewing the what the East Africa Indian Ocean Division, the East Central Africa Division had said to the TOSC committee, and they had said, if we really want to make a good decision when we come to San Antonio, we really need to start educating our people and our pastoral leaders and our church pastors. And without doing this, everything's for no purpose. And they virtually predicted the outcome that happened, because they said without educating our people, without getting them up to speed, there's no value in making a decision anyway.
I agree.
So these people at the General Conference were absolutely determined not to do anything to help the Africans come to understand the things the way the West were understanding them, and so we live with the problem.
I think it's good that some people have the big picture in mind, but I really believe that the church belongs to me just as much as it does to people who believe unswervingly in 1844. I believe that the church is my church just as much as it's Neil Wilson's church. And I'm not going to let go of that belief unless something
went wrong with the audio there, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
I
Do you
don't
want
know
me
what
to do it
happened
again?
with everyone else, just where you were just saying you feel like it's yours as well.
Well, I
Do you
don't
hear
see
that
why
too,
I
Peter?
should feel. I just don't see why I should feel like the Adventist Church is any less my church than Ted Wilson's church. And until somebody kicks me out, which, nobody's going to have the guts to do if I have anything to say about it. And
I love your passion.
I'm just not going to be kicked out. Like, I think that the gospel is that Jesus died to save us from our sins, right? I think that the beautiful truths that the Adventist Church has to share with other denominations and with the wider Christendom are about Sabbath rest, are about an understanding of free will that allows us to understand sin and suffering and still believe in a loving, all-powerful God. I think that our understanding of death is the most peaceful of any in any of the denominations. And I could keep going, but I won't. We've all been brought up on this stuff. But I don't see why I should be forced to walk away from that just because a bunch of old white men in suits don't want women to be ordained. Like, really? Really? And I don't want the kids in my church not to have the benefit of my encouragement and my hopeful wisdom, maybe a little bit, just like I had that of those that came before me. And if that becomes tenable, and I get that that's at different points for different people, and for you, Pete, it has become untenable, and I respect that you were able to walk away and maintain, your faith. But that point hasn't come yet for me, and I pray it won't. And I pray that even in my little corner of the planet, I'll be able to make the difference that makes other kids feel like they can maintain their faith and support their churches too, whether or not they stay or go from the organisation. That's what I think.
Yeah, I agree, 100%, and good on you. And don't let them push you out.
They won't. Trust me.
Thank you. I'll do all I can to keep you in, Ruth-Ellen.
Thanks, Daddy, but I'm going to disagree with you on the ethical issues.
Yeah, good. Well said, Ruth-Ellen. Well said. And I know lots of people that are watching this. I'm a minority with my thoughts. A minority. I get into lots of trouble for suggesting the idea of Norwegian Union breaking away and making what's his name, the Jackson, Dan Jackson, the president of the new movement.
I think there's definite value in that, but families have to learn to get along, so why not a church?
Yeah, I think so, but I think it's exhibited that it can't, is where I always come back to.
Mm-hmm.
And people keep telling me my whole life it's going to change, it's changing, it's going to change, it's great at my grassroots church, make a difference, yeah, but when I watched the no vote, and then I saw the compliance document come in, and then I watched the Tuesday night council where they just over and over, warning these people, and I just thought they cannot get along. They just cannot.
For me, the encouraging thing, Peter, as far as all
some encouragement,
we need some encouragement, perhaps. My little voice and my pen seems to have been used in a very constructive fashion as far as this ordination debate in the church is concerned, at least as far as Spectrum is concerned. And I've written about, I'm not sure of the number, about 12 or 15 articles about ordination and religious freedom and conscience, freedom of conscience, on the Spectrum blog. And people sit up and listen. People tell me from the General Conference that they're reading my articles and to keep going and to make my contribution. And although I sit outside the organised work at the present, I'm still able to make that sort of contribution, and that to me says a lot. I haven't been able to help to bring a final solution to this issue, but no one else has either.
I could see Wendy look across at your use of words there.
Yes.
The final, Peter Marks, the final solution.
Maybe cut that part out. I am.
But good on you, Peter. Well done.
I think, I think my sister and I are quite proud of Daddy's stance on women's ordination, actually, because
I'm not sure that grandfather would disagree. I have no idea which way he would have gone. Mother was the first to burn the
Careful.
Burn the hat. She burnt the hat, not the bra.
Thank you,
but in her local church at Bundaberg, she was the first to dispense with the hat.
Really?
So my mother was a liberated woman.
Oh, God.
And certainly my sisters have been liberated women. Barbara, my sister, Barbara Rice. And well,
yes, but no, Daddy, I did want to say on the record that my sister and I, as much as we agree on lots of things theologically and disagree on lots of things ethically, Amy Lynn and I have always been very proud of the fact that you support women's ordination, or that, no, let's rephrase, that you think the whole idea of ordination is biblically unsound and that we shouldn't ordain anyone and that we should commission both men and women, right? But we like that.
Closer to the point.
Do you think though, Peter, that we should go slow and bow to the GC's decision, though, that even though we don't agree with it?
No, he doesn't.
No, we should start educating each other. That's what we should do.
How's that education been going?
The Africans are willing to hear from us, but we're not willing to speak up to them. And this is absolutely wrong. If we want to come, if we want to shepherd everyone along before we make a final decision, let's do that. But let's do the shepherding.
They've had committees, and it's been dragging on for, like, I've been watching it for 40 years, and I've been told it was 20 years before I was observing it. That's 60.
But it's not a level playing field for all divisions, you see. The Americans think that they're ready to move ahead because they think that everyone else has had the same opportunities to understand the issues that they have. When they've been coping with the issue now for 40 or 50 years, and this division have come along behind them to a great degree, but other divisions haven't given a thought. So we must be faced with the issues and educated, and then make the decision.
It's too late. It's been made, and it's one of the compliance document orders. Ordination is not to be accepted.
No, I think that'll change. But I think the other thing I wanted to say was, which I don't feel like we have heaps of time to discuss now, but the big elephant in the room is how we treat people who disagree with us. And if the people in power are always going to believe that people have, like Grandad said in his letter, that you have to sign a document in agreement on these principles in order to be part of the club, well, then Pete's right, it's never going to work. But if that can change either from a grassroots level or at the top, or both at different times or the same time, and we can agree that the things that make us Adventist are less restricting than the lists that have sometimes been pumped out, well, then we can get along. And I think this, without knowing as much about the Glacier View history as either of you, my mum and dad and Peter, I think that it sounds like there was a lot of hurt, pain, bitterness caused by not only the throwing out of Des Ford's ideas, but the throwing out of the man and the way he was treated. And other people have been treated like that in the church, and it's unacceptable. And I think the more people stand up to say that kind of behaviour is unacceptable, then the more we can move to a humane agreement in the fact that even while we may not always agree on theology, we can treat each other in a Christ-like manner. And I think that's been missing from a lot of these discussions.
Well, you must remember, Ruth-Ellen, that my father, your grandfather, was born in 1907. Most of his colleagues in the Concerned Brethren, the original Concerned Brethren, as I like to call them, were born before him. So a lot of them were born in the 1800s. And my father's grandfather was born in 1808, when King George III was still on the throne. Not even the Prince Regent was around.
But what does that have to do? What do you mean?
These people had a more black and white view of the world, not only on theology, but on a host of other issues as well.
Do you think that's true?
I think they're all exactly the same. We all want to protect what we see as our special thing, our special community. Everybody since the beginning of time wants to protect that. And then power, like you said before, people get more corporate power, and therefore the suppression and oppression kicks in. But we all have that human nature to want to protect that good little thing we've got. And if you've got George Burnside bringing in 2,000 people a night for 22 nights in a row with this message, and the Lord's coming back and singing, they suddenly see new theology coming along and going, we're going to dismantle that. No one wants to have their ideas dismantled. And in fact, I've got to be careful, because a lot of my detractors will say you're just dismantling our ideas, and that brings us shame. And I try really hard not to do that. I'm just trying to protect my little tribe that grew out of questions on doctrine and has a beautiful history black and white, and we all can read Desire of Ages and love it, and the beautiful image of Jesus she portrays. But my thread goes from that intersection over here. So my church goes back to that. Whereas the church that Raglan wanted, he was on this trajectory trying to get back to that fork in the road of questions on a doctrine and go back to before that. So it's all human nature is the same. It's not that we were once more black and white and now we're not. We're always going to fight for that special little thing we've got. Ruth-Ellen's fighting for her local church, the right of young kids to have a safe space. It's the hardest thing for me to leave in my mind was my special Adventism I'd grown up with that had all this kind of stuff. And the three of us represent that. Ruth-Ellen, young people, me in that kind of range where we've kind of really questioned things and maybe left or gone fringe, and Peter and Wendy, the three of us represent a big chunk of what we're talking about, and we love each other and we get on well. So it can be done, but there's a problem here that, and Ruth-Ellen is right, that Glacier View happened and people were not treated right. We don't understand. We're not good as Adventists, at dealing with conflict with each other. What do you think, Ruth-Ellen? What could come into play if my idea is wrong, splitting, and Peter's idea maybe of hoping people come back a bit more in alignment? What's your suggestion of how people can better be able to speak up but not have fear of losing their jobs? Speak up and do it in a way that's more loving, because I've seen a lifetime of loving conversations and people trying to work through this. My fear is that the DNA of Adventism is constant, unresolvable conflict and an unbelievably impossible have a lack of ability to deal with that difference.
Yeah, and you could be right, but I pray that we can listen to each other. I think that's the foundation for me, and I've got a few ideas that I'm going to be testing soon about how to make that happen in the space of some of people who disagree about back to some of our ethical issues. For me, it's really important that we treat women with equality. It's really important as well that some of my closest friends are gay and lesbian and transgender and bisexual and Adventist. And to me, it's really important that we listen to those voices and that we listen to stories, because there's lots of people really hurting in that community. And I didn't want to get into a discussion on that with my father, because we love each other and I'd like it to stay that way. But I do think that community starts with listening, and that we have to be more willing to listen to each other than we are to say that we're right.
So this is the thing. They are not going to agree with that. The people that want the Liberals out, Jill corrected me, it was 70,000, not 700,000.
Oh, really?
Statement that if just go and watch, they go and look up your Alpha Omegas. They do not want us here. They will not talk because they see it as the devil. Like I've been called the tool of Satan so many times in the last 40 years.
But the whole us and them paradigm is the thing that causes the trouble to begin with. Like, I'm not really interested in talking to the theys who aren't willing to listen to me, because I'm willing to listen to whoever they are. So if they're willing to engage in that dialogue, then I'm interested. If they're not, then we don't need to have a conversation. And I just don't think that all the leaders of the church are that they category where they're not willing to listen. I think there's certainly a big chunk who won't listen. I don't know who they are. I don't know names of them, like, the organizations that you're referring to and so on. But maybe I'm just naive coming to it from a belief that, if people who disagree sit down and talk to each other, then good things can happen. And I know for a fact that there's at least a few of the people in power in Australia in the Adventist Church who have some empathy towards those ideas of listening to those who have been marginalised. And
Behind I think the scenes, they'll agree with you and they'll talk about it. But for some reason, they're ham-strapped. They can't move.
But I just don't believe that. I think that you have to take one step at a time. And I can't say that when I'm in your position I don't know how many years older than me are you? I don't know.
I'm 58.
So look, in 30 years, when I'm sitting and having these discussions,
and I would have been you. Can I just say, I was the guy saying, "Let's talk together. Let's do it. We can make these changes."
Yeah, and I don't know. Maybe I'll be sitting there and I'll be you, and I'll say, "Look, we tried, didn't work."
And then you'll be talking to people saying, "Oh, come on. You didn't try hard enough, or you didn't maybe try this, or we could sit around a table, we'd come to an agreement." Eventually, you just realize it's impossible.
I just don't think it is.
It's beautiful, like you and me and a bunch of Liberals can talk about. We don't agree with a lot of stuff, but we'll be able to talk about it, and we'll be able to work to agreement and consensus, and we'll be able on. And we can have dinners and catch-ups with Peter and Wendy's metaphoric group, and we can still love the history, but the group that your grandfather founded was part of the founding and monetizing of is not going to ever, because they see it as a sign of the end if they acquiesce to this sit down and work it out together. We are the evil in it.
But there's so many people within the church who are willing to sit and talk, that to write it all up. Pardon?
Publicly?
Well, I could name a few names, but I don't know that I should do that. But a few of them are related to me. I've grown up with them in summer camps or big camps, or and I know that they're willing to listen. So I just don't see that there's doom for us. I think to cleanly split would be harder than trying to work things out. And I think that there is room for there to be slightly fringe conservative groups. Anyway, and slightly fringe, more liberal groups, and for us all to still be part of the same big umbrella. But yeah, I don't know. I suppose I'll see what I think in 30 years, Peter. I don't know.
Look, and
25 is more like.
I don't want to sound condescending, but I had every youth leader say the same to me and listen for hours to my passionate desire to bring left and right together. Even what I'm doing now is trying to bring left and right together. My passion is that we should coexist and love each other and break bread together, but to just go, we are just not on the same page theologically. We are not.
It just doesn't. It's hard because it doesn't affect. And that's, I suppose, the other difficulty is that when you do have a good local church, or you are in a conference or a division or a union that is a little bit more, I don't like that word either, liberal, but compared to some of the rest of the world church.
Sorry, go ahead.
But we're blessed in Australia. Like, I don't feel the weight of Ted Wilson so much over here. And so I can continue to do what I'm doing and make my small difference and be part of the conversation.
I'm just saying it's coming. That's been my kind of thing.
Daddy, what do you think?
I had a kind of a, sorry, go on, Peter. What do you think?
Can we cover?
Well, I've grown up with many of the leaders in our division. There's some of them are my classmates, and others, and in Britain as well. And I think, well, it's not them sometimes that makes the problem. It's the whole system, the way the system is set up to demand outcomes that aren't to the liking of anyone. And that's the way I see things, because I see these people as good people in themselves, but when they get caught in the vice of the system, then things start to go wrong for the best of them.
And that's why I stayed so long. I love these guys. I cannot think of any of the people we're talking about that I don't like. I think I'd actually like Ted Wilson, and I definitely liked your dad. I don't dislike these people. I'm just saying this is water and oil. It is. Who
was it that said that democracy is like the worst system of government in the world, but it's the best? It was what was the quote?
Winston Churchill, I think.
What did he say? What did he say?
It's a pity Adventism doesn't take that lead then.
Well, I mean, he said something about how awful democracy is. It's better than all the other ones. Isn't that what he said? Something.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that Adventists
consensus and.
Yeah, and Adventists are not, I don't want to say we're the best denomination. I've got heaps of friends in other wonderful denominations. I think that what we've got makes the most sense of the Bible. And I think that some of the things about the structure we've got and the things I love about our church are great. I've loved growing up in a centralized system that gives kids opportunities to be involved in mission trips and summer camps and all that kind of thing. And I love being part of a world church where we have the financial structure to make a health system happen, for example. That's awesome. I think heaps of great things about the way we do church.
100%. Agree.
A a good friend put it to me just on this chat, actually, that, you know, there are so many different kinds of Adventists, that would you just split it into liberal and conservative, or would you have to split it?
No.
You have to split it 6 ways to get, you know, like there has to come a point at which there has to be a group of people that say we're not the same, but we are in this together. And, you know, if we're saying there's oil and water, then why not salt and sugar? And, you know, how many times can you split the church? Like, is that useful? I don't think it is. And that's why I think we have to talk.
I toy with the idea, but I don't think I would ever want to be quoted as saying the church should split. I just think there needs to be some way that this kind of headbutt that comes to the church constantly since its birth can be eased, marginalised, put to one side, because there is going to be trouble ahead.
I think it's time for for those that believe in women in ministry to put their money where their mouth is.
Amen.
And if 70 unions were to do it, or even 50 unions, the General Conference Executive Committee couldn't do anything.
Well,
maybe we should make that our next project, Daddy. Yeah. Maybe we should fly around the world and visit all the unions when COVID lifts. What do you think?
I'm on board. Let's do it. Let's influence the unions to stand up for women's ordination. Make it my last hurrah.
We've moved away a bit from Glacier View.
I was just going to say, can I bring it to Glacier View? We're going to wrap up very soon. We've kind of gone in tangents and all sorts of places, but this kind of conversation is important for 2 reasons. We're open to talking. We love each other. I have a huge amount of respect for you 3. I come away with things going, oh yeah, I've changed my mind a bit on that, or, you know, we're open to these things. And so it doesn't matter that we've gone off tangent. That's totally fine. So anyone that says to me, hey, you didn't talk much about Glacier View, so what? This actually is important, and Glacier View typified there not being enough allowance of this kind of conversation. So it is very relevant to that. But back to actual Glacier View and you, Peter, because Ruth-Ellen wasn't born, and you, Wendy, I want to just hear your emotional experiences that you guys had. What were you feeling as you were hearing this stuff unfold? And you would have had some pretty first-hand reports back. And were you 2 together at that stage?
No, we married at the end of 1981.
Yes.
So I had 1981 off from college, and I graduated at the end of 1982. So in 1980, I was Ross Cole's roommate, and I remember him getting rather stressed on the day that the decision came through that Des would be defrocked. And we need to remember around that time the Chamberlain affair.
That kind of overshadowed everything, didn't it? It just really took...
that happened within a few days of
81, I think, wasn't it? 81? Or was it 80? It was 80. Christmas. It was the Christmas of 81. Yeah. And August was Glacier View.
It was August 1980.
So it was the same time.
Yes, it was within a few days of Glacier View. So there were big upheavals everywhere as far as church members in this division were concerned, not only for the aftermath of Glacier View, but also because of the Chamberlains. But I was sort of in the eye of the storm, and that's a pretty safe place to be. And people could say what they liked around me. I was pretty shy and withdrawn in those days, and really I didn't have too much to contribute one way or the other. When I graduated and went into the ministry in Victoria in 1983, I was very thankful to have a conference president who believed in giving me an opportunity where other presidents may not have, just because of my surname. But
Yeah.
and here thereafter, I gained a little bit of flack from my colleagues in ministry in Victoria because of my conservative beliefs, and I tried to express them as best I could in their hearing sometimes, and they would fly off the handle at me. But mostly, Glacier View, I wasn't exercised the same way that many of my my classmates and many of my more senior people in ministry were, and I can sympathise with them when they were expunged from the ministry in the worst of circumstances. And I don't know about the rights and wrongs of Glacier View and the decisions taken thereafter with Des. I still like to believe for myself that Des was on the wrong track, but whether the church dealt with him as kindly as they could have, that's up to history to judge, not up for me to judge.
Was your father excited? Did he talk about it?
Well, yeah, I was an indoor student at that stage. I'd been an outdoor student for a few years and then an indoor student for another few. And then I went away in 1981 and was away for, my mother talked about it a little because she was on the division executive that made the decision about Des, because he had his credentials from the division, you see. So, you know, in round terms,
Did she talk about that?
Yeah, just briefly.
What did she say?
I've forgotten, it's 40 years ago, Peter. But yeah, so I was in the eye of the storm in the mid to late 70s when things were getting hot for Des, and I think the brethren made the right move by inducing him to go to Pacific Union College for 2 years or thereabouts.
Mummy's always, whenever I've heard you talk about Des, Mummy, you always just talk about how much you enjoyed him as a teacher, don't you?
I did very much.
Do you remember anything that you liked in particular that he used to say?
He was the kindest, most caring man.
Mm. When Wendy first got sick at the end of 1976, he came, he wrote her a letter and was very kind to her. Des has always been kind to our family. He went to Avondale with my oldest brother. My oldest brother graduated from Avondale in 1951, I think. So, and had been there years before that as well. Several years in the end of high school and the beginning of college. And then he began to teach Joy in about 1963, Stan through the 60s, Barb in the early 70s, and us in the mid to late 70s. I was in the class with Ross. I had Des for 6 months. I appreciated the way he emphasized Christ and his righteousness. Yeah, but I see that the fact that Des chose to believe the specifics about justification the way he did, in very much in line with a Lutheran understanding of justification, fitting with his denial of the sanctuary doctrine. And the two things came together. You know, you can't say, well, Des was right on this, but he was wrong on that. You must say the two things led one to another.
Do you know,
And,
I suppose after having this discussion, I knew that he ran a radio program because one of my good friends listened to it. I never met him. I would have liked to. And now listening to the letter from Granddad and Dad, some of your memories, and Mum, of course, I've always known how much you respected him. I wish I'd met him, and I would have liked to have picked his brains about my granddad too, because it's kind of interesting to understand where you come from.
I had the pleasure of meeting him, and in fact, the first 3 podcast episodes are an interview I had with him. And 2 years before that, he took 2 programs for me down here in Cooranbong. And I did ask him about the Concerned Brethren, and he's always loving. Like, if you want to judge someone by their fruits in a lifetime period, this man lived the gospel, loved Jesus, shared the faith, had a health message that he lived, loved the writings of Ellen White, saw things in perspective.
well, undoubtedly, my father had a sharp pen, but he had a heart like a pussycat, really.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
I experienced that in my family.
I never had any. I would never
there
have
are
anything
many
bad.
people around
I would never have anything
Cooranbong.
bad to say about Raglan.
Yeah, there are many people around Cooranbong who could tell you stories about him that I needn't repeat. But
And talk
yeah,
about putting.
of his kindness.
I'll say stuff. He
Yeah.
put people through college.
yeah.
Lots of people
Well,
thank him.
you see, I and my 6 brothers and sisters were all graduates of Avondale, and that's a record, I believe, for any family. My father believed in Adventist education, always has and always will. He believed in the mission work of the church, and he supported that with his tithe to the nth degree. He believed in the ministry of Creation Ministries International, or Answers in Genesis as it was, and he supported that to the nth degree too. He put his money where his heart was, you know, and
that's what I was going to say. Is when and you said it for me. If you looked at the life of Raglan Marx as well,
yeah,
the fruits were shown, and yet we have these strangely divisive things that clash and
well, Dad was a very complex character, you know.
Right.
His grandmother was a temperance lady, and his grandfather was a wine merchant.
We have the president of the Temperance Women's Worldwide Temperance. I think she's. I think Joy. She's either the worldwide or just Australia. I think it's worldwide now, isn't it? I don't know.
Yeah, I think so.
Right up there, incredible lady.
And there was one of my church members in New Zealand who held that position at one stage too. What's her name? Margaret Jackson.
So I'm going to ask 2 questions, and then I'm going to let Ruth-Ellen and Wendy have the last word. But I want you all to chip in with this. To avoid another Glacier View, what can we do?
Daddy, you go first.
Or what should we have done?
What should we have done? Well, perhaps you need to go first, Ruth-Ellen, and give me.
I was told I could have the last word.
That's on my next question.
Oh.
Well,
I think sorry, Daddy, go ahead.
There's one difference between the era of Glacier View and the era of today, and that is that Desford really was a tall poppy theologically, and there weren't too many his equal. But today in our church, there are many who could balance each other off, you know. So things may not happen the way they did in those days, because there's been so much development as far as theologians and biblical scholars are concerned. Yeah.
Mummy, what do you think? How could we stop Glacier View happening again and having somebody kicked out who has a different idea?
Well, I was so disgusted that Des Wood was, because he did so much for so many.
Mm.
How do you think we could stop it from happening? Do you think there's a way?
I think stick together.
Yeah. Stick together. Sometimes it's the simple, powerful ideas that make the most sense.
It is.
I would like to, actually, you've challenged me really, Peter, because I can think of a few young leaders in my generation, even in our own union and division, whose ideas I do not agree with. And I think I need to get in a room and talk to them.
Good.
Because I think that there are more things that bring us together than divide us. And I know that's not necessarily the conclusion you've reached after 30 years being wiser than me.
No. I wish. If I had your brain and reached the age I am now, maybe things would have been different.
It just does make me think that, you know, we do run the risk of this happening again in our generation. And I don't want to walk away. You know, I'm a doctor, I'm not a theologian. I'd love to do a theological degree, but I don't think I'll have time till I retire. But and I don't know if anyone will take me seriously with that one. But, you know, I do think that, you know, two things I've learned from my medical training and two things I've learned, I suppose, from my emergency role is that people don't listen if you shout at them, and that people will listen if you share a common goal. So if I say to that annoying surgical reg on the phone that's telling me to go away because it's 3 o'clock in the morning and I have a burst appendix I need him or her to take out, they're not going to listen if I yell at them and tell them to stop being rude to me at 3 o'clock in the morning. But they might listen if I say to them, I get how tired you are. I'm so sorry. I've been trying to hold off calling you as long as I can. I'm really worried about this patient and I'd like us to look after them together. That works well 9 times out of 10. And the other approach doesn't. And I think we can do that in ministry as well.
We need each other, don't we?
Yeah.
I think my advice is that your age group and those that are watching, are you millennial or younger? The millennials and younger need to get organised to make these things happen. You know, be as organised as your grandfather was, and Peter, you need to get organised with this union idea you're talking about too.
I do, Daddy.
And so yeah, well said again. And Wendy, one thing I think that is the secret to you having such wonderful daughters is that I remember you two when I was at college in 81, and I could tell that you guys were in love back then. And I can tell it right now. You guys are just...
Wendy was the life of every party in 1981. And
you can tell
she
you love each
invited
other.
me to a few parties, and that's how she caught me.
I might have been playing music at some of those parties.
Yeah.
So Wendy, can you share? You exude love and enthusiasm and a passion for life, and you've infused that into your daughters and to your husband. I've never seen him smiling so much as this interview tonight. Can you just share with us, and then I am going to let Ruth-Ellen just close, but just share with us. Oh, and Peter, one last quick thing from you. But so Peter first, because I want to finish with the girls. Peter, tell us what the gospel means to you, like the good news. What's the good news of the gospel for you?
Oh, yeah, the good news is that Christ is the victor. He's won the battle. The war is over and there's peace. Well, there will be peace in the world, God is still on the throne. And we are the gospel heralds. And I like to think about the Battle of Waterloo and how they got the message through from the Battle of Waterloo to London. And they had a major that they commissioned to take the message through from Waterloo. He was riding his horse to the English Channel, and then he caught a little boat and got becalmed. Finally, he reached the other side of the English Channel, and he got in a carriage and four and rushed into London in his carriage. And then he went in search of the Prince Regent to tell him, and he stumbled up the steps into the ballroom where the Prince Regent was having a ball. And he said, "Victory, King, victory." And that's what we need to be announcing to the world. And that's why Adventists have been called to herald that gospel message to the world of victory. And it's not only victory for us as individuals, but it's victory when the final great controversy is finished and Jesus has come. And we look forward to that soon. I don't know how soon. I'm agnostic about that, but I like to think that Jesus is coming soon, and I see lots of signs that tell me that things are hotting up. But I don't know how much further beyond will still happen before he does come.
Thank you. And Wendy, can you tell us about your current relationship with Jesus?
Close as close.
Yeah.
I think my mum and daddy, my mum turns 93 in June, and my daddy I love so dearly. They were both.
What happens every morning then?
Every morning I start with my Bible.
She wakes up before I do.
I have the most lovely memories of my final year in high school. I'm sure that in some ways they weren't lovely at the time, but I had to get up early for band practice or sports training or whatever thing I had that morning every day in high school. And in my last year, when I was sitting my final exams, every day of that school year that I remember, Mummy, you used to come into my room, do you remember?
I do.
You'd wake me up at 5:30.
I would.
Sit on my bed and you'd read the Bible to me, and then you'd tell me to get up because I had to go to whatever sporting or cultural practice I had to attend at 7:30 in the morning.
What time did you go to bed at night?
Well, that was the other end of the day. I had Daddy with me sitting. I'd make him stay awake and sit with me so I could write my assignments late into the night. So he'd sit on the couch nodding off because I needed company. And so Dad would be there at 10 or 11 at night while I was finishing my English assignment, and I was reading paragraphs of it to him. And Mum would be there at 5:30 in the morning waking me up for worship.
My mum's first baby was born blind. And so my daddy would tell me to be 5 minutes early or was on time.
Where weren't you? You always got me up on time. It wasn't your fault if I ended up being late after that. Yeah.
And thank you, Wendy and Peter, for those reflections. And Ruth-Ellen, the final word before I give a quick blurb about what's coming up. Can you tell us what do you see hopeful within the Adventist Church? What's your beacon of hope that you see ahead?
The children. Always the next generation, isn't it? I just sit in junior Sabbath school and I listen to the insights that their 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14-year-olds have, because it's quite a big, diverse group. And I just think, man, they get the gospel. And to me, the gospel is so simple. It's just that I was born into an imperfect world because of sin, and it's stuffed, and everything I see, from the world news to the lives of my patients to, my own health crisis that's just happened. And I just think We need Jesus so much. And, you know, the kids get it. And for them, it's simple. And I remember it being simple. And it's just that Jesus came and he died for us and he rose again. And that he's going to come back. And that it'll happen when it happens. And it'll probably be soon. And who knows what that means. But in the meantime, you know, we can trust him, even when it's really rough. And, you know, I have hope that our generation will be able to talk about that and put that in the frame, in the front and center frame, and that the generation coming up after us will be able to do the same.
Beautiful. Talking to you guys has refreshed my heart tonight, really has. And I'm not a stuck-in concrete guy, but I'm passionate and I'm not scared to ask questions. And I just think that I've really understood togetherness even more tonight because of this conversation. I hope that people watching have enjoyed it and learned something from it. And if we've left anything out, just ask questions in the comments. I think we're all members in this group. And we're going to have some more interesting conversations coming up. We've got Lyle tomorrow, I think, your first cousin, Wendy. Is tomorrow Thursday? Let me look at my... Lyle at 2 o'clock tomorrow. And then we've got Harry Ballas at 2 o'clock on Friday. And so I'm looking forward to those conversations as well. And I think we're hopefully going to leave behind a resource when SDAQ&A finally packs up its pegs. I think there'll be a resource that I'm really hoping to leave online for people to kind of just look at. But hopefully the people won't judge. You know, we're seekers. We're trying to be together. We're trying to heal, and hopefully that comes across even in the more robust moments of our conversations. So thank you very much, you guys. Hope you'll join me Friday night, 6 o'clock. Anyone else watching? Campfire Songs. I think there's a link somewhere on the comments down in the thread somewhere. If you're free, come. And we're not going to talk theology. We're just going to sing. And so until next time, thank you very much. And if people are watching, as a thank you, just start clicking those love heart buttons, and let's show that we all do seek that togetherness. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you then, Peter. We'll catch you again.
Look forward to it.
Bye, Daddy.
Thank you.
Ruth-Ellen.
Next time you're in Kurumbong, let me know.
Yep.
I'll take you out to lunch.
Oh,
I'll come to my boyhood home.
Yes, you're welcome. And there we have it. We're now back in 2025. We just watched the interview season 2, episode 9 with Peter Marks, Wendy Marks, and their daughter Ruth-Ellen Macked. Did you pronounce the T there, Peter? Has that come through? Or now you've gone silent again, so I might get you to let me fix that. It's a problem this end. Hang on, I've got it. There we go. So yes, hopefully I pronounced that correctly, Peter. Can you just do a testing 1, 2?
Testing 1, 2, 3. Yep.
Perfect. So we're going to come back in 5 minutes and reflect on the show that we just watched. And wow, it was interesting, Peter. I can't wait to talk to you about it. It was actually very positive. In my memory, I thought we got a little bit tense at times, but looking back, it was a lovely conversation. And as I said at the end, very, very refreshing. So we will be back, everybody. Stick around. We're going to ask Peter what his memories and thoughts are and how he feels having just watched the 5-year ago very interesting interview we had, number 9 of season 2. We will be right back.
love me so much more than I could ever know. Your love is deeper than this world will ever show. And all of life's beauty shines around this moment now. The sky and the cliffs, they seem to change my life somehow. And I will never be the same, will never be the same. Whoa, 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 I will never be the same, never be the same ever again. Well, here I am waiting, Lord, my life is just for you. Please unfold all the plans that you would have me do. And if all the world's just a breath and nothing's here to stay, and all of the love we feel will save us anyway. And I will never be the same, will never be the same. Whoa, 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 I will never be the same, will never be the same ever again.
And we are back. It's 2025. So if you're listening to the podcast, I hope you just enjoyed our re-release, season 2, episode 9 and 86, where I interviewed Peter Marks, Wendy Marks, and their daughter, Ruth-Ellen Mucht. Is it pronounced like that, Peter?
Mucht.
Oh, I got it right. Good.
Yep.
And hopefully Ruth-Ellen is watching this at a later date. And boy, I loved her questions and her mind and her comments that she made. One big takeaway for me was the comment she made that she likes to stay in the church and enjoy her local church because of the children growing up who may perhaps be negatively affected by some of the church doctrines on the time of trouble and close of probation, etc. And I thought that was a good point, that sometimes people staying in the church can continue to offer a little bit more of a softer landing than they may get in some of the different churches. So what were your immediate thoughts as you watched all of that?
Yeah, I really appreciated what Ruth-Ellen was saying about how our Adventist theology needs to be contextualized in the human experience. That was a theme that was running right through her comments about whether to pull away from the church or to stay in and try and dialogue, but as well as dialogue, she was emphasizing the fact that we needed to have that. Well, we needed to recognize that theology needs to have a human face, meeting human needs and human suffering where it exists, and I appreciated that so much. And as you might have understood. At the time, Ruth-Ellen was struggling with a rather new diagnosis about having MS, which has since receded into the background almost entirely. And she had some immunotherapy for the first year or two, and then has never spoken to us about it again. So
yes,
it's not the same animal as it is in Wendy's case.
Yes, I've heard there are two different types, and one can kind of recede, and some people don't. They might have one or two episodes in the whole life, and they live a long, normal life. But sadly, for other people like Wendy, it takes its toll.
No, it's and also for the fact that with their new drugs, etc., with their new treatment protocols these days, and catching MS early rather than letting it go on and go on and go on before they start treatment is a great thing, because Wendy went into remission with MS in 1977, but it really came back to bite her and affected her whole working career, really, although we didn't recognize it at the time. So, so that's just the context in which the original interview happened. And I'm really thankful that the Lord has blessed Ruth-Ellen, and she still continues to enjoy her local church, and make an acceptable contribution there, and Benny's fitting right in with it as well.
And they've got one or two kids now.
1.5.
1.5. Exciting.
Yeah. Leon is 2.5 years old, almost, and Chili is on his way. When Chili is born, he will have a completely different name. Leon's in utero name was Guacamole.
Right.
And Chili is meant to be his equal there.
I love it.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, so tell us some more thoughts.
Yeah, I would express myself a little differently than I did it at that stage, I think today. But basically, my thoughts haven't changed. I wish I had. I organized my life a little better to have more time for reading and study and theology than I do these days, because everything, the urgent seems to get in the way of the important in my life. And although Wendy is well cared for by support workers at the moment and leaving me a lot of time for myself, I seem to get wrapped up in all sorts of issues. And I was a bit hamstrung once or twice when I had difficulties with the technology at the beginning. It was because I was trying to see you as well as cope with what else was coming on the screen. So and it didn't work. So I went yeah. So yeah, my father was a complex character, as I described. Um, he he was outspoken in his beliefs, and I think I characterized his theology a little bit accurately when I said that, having been at Avondale in the late 1920s, and he graduated in 1930, not 31 now, as I understand it. He was under the influence of his teachers and under the influence of Emil Andreasen, who objected strongly to questions on doctrine in 1957 and thereafter. But Dad was never much inclined to go after Robert Brinsmead, you know. He just didn't see light in that at all. And no,
Yeah,
and mother.
I've often wondered why they targeted Des more than Bob Brinsmead.
Oh, I think Des did.
Des was an employee, I guess, of the church,
Yeah,
whereas Bob wasn't.
I guess Des was the one who dealt with Robert Brinsmead, and he came around to seeing the way Des was seeing theologically, whereas Des Ford was sticking out as a tall poppy, and I guess the nature of Adventism in the South Pacific Division changed in that era. Before, it had been driven mostly by public evangelists, and they're very well represented in the original Concerned Brethren, and it was that sort of Adventism that they were rooting for. When Des came along, Des wanted to nuance Adventism and make it more academically inclined, and Des wasn't afraid, and his followers weren't afraid of pluralism, religious pluralism, or Adventist pluralism, and as you've discussed quite well, Dad and the other Concerned Brethren had no time for religious pluralism in Adventism at all. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're not quite a broad church as in Adventist circles, are we? Not like the Anglican Church, which has people who are functional atheists or agnostics, as well as people who are very evangelical. The wide spectrum there. Adventists are more focused on the middle of the road, perhaps, or they want to be.
Yes. Do you think the dialogue that that Ruth-Ellen was talking about that she wished and hoped would happen. And I think you were being quite positive in some of the things you said about what you'd been writing for Spectrum and whatnot, not just regarding women's ordination, but on a number of topics to help bring these two sides closer together. They don't have to agree, but to some sort of a more cohesive way than that there seems to be at the moment. Do you think that has happened in the last 5 years? Is it less likely to happen now as you follow some of the leadership patterns that are emerging?
Yeah, no, you mentioned these leadership patterns, and that's an important factor in whether it happens or not, whether the dialogue happens or not. The In the last little while, in the last few months, it's become increasingly obvious that more and more of our leadership aren't quite as accountable as they need to be to their membership, and I think this is a tragic development. I wish, for instance, that we could have a discussion about COVID matters, and we and agree to disagree, but at least give each other the precious privilege of dialogue. And in many other aspects of our life and our Adventist life and theology, we need to do the same. So, but it appears to me that the Spring Council of the General Conference and other murmurings coming from other parts of the Adventist world don't give me too much hope at the present time. I just trust that maybe there'll be an earthquake or two in St. Louis in a few weeks' time, and that things will be overturned, and the Lord will overrule in a very wonderful way. I'm not sure who's in the running if Ted Wilson doesn't make it back, and if his mate Cola from South America doesn't feature. By all reports, Ernst Kohler is even more conservative than Ted Wilson has ever been. So yeah, it's I'd like to be a fly on the wall, or at least to be there when it happens, but I won't be.
When you, in that 5 year ago interview, you mentioned that you thought all of this stuff would just fall by the wayside once the Ted Wilson leadership subsided, and you seemed confident that it was going to do that. At the time, I was predicting that no, he would get voted in again, and everyone was saying no, that's not true, that can't happen. The liberal progressives were saying that to me, and then it did happen. And I remember thinking, well, surely now people are going to go, okay, so maybe there is a big problem here we need to address. But as we come up to this next vote, and I'm saying the same thing, he'll be back in, or someone equivalent to him, someone of his ilk, someone of his political persuasion, someone groomed by him. People are still saying, no, that won't happen. What's going on with that? Why are people not wanting to address this? Like this fact that things are getting worse is what I'm saying for the liberal progressive. And they seem intent on not speaking publicly, not speaking positively about their movement. This era that we talked about in the interview where Ruth-Ellen and I were discussing about North New South Wales, and a bunch of us were committed to really pushing the gospel Adventist view, focus on Jesus, and how she valued that. And a lot of people have said that they valued that kind of sense of progress in the right direction, but they all seem to be saying, Pete, things are going to change. No, Ted Wilson won't get in again. And yet they're not shouting their passion for Jesus from the rooftop in the same way. By that, I mean by also saying we disagree with a lot of what Ted Wilson and his movement is doing to the Adventist Church. Why are they naive to the fact that things are changing in a direction that may eventually edge them out of the church altogether?
I don't have all the answers. For myself, I wonder whether Ted will make it back again. Simply for the fact that he's 75 or 76 or whatever it is, and he can't expect to go on forever. Now, he may be like his father and get rather annoyed when someone gets in front of him, but I'm I'm not sure that he will actually. But I'm not sure that Ernst Kohler, the General Conference Secretary, will make it back. Some things seem to be happening in South America that were partly his doing, if I understand correctly.
A lot of problems there that have certainly brought Ted's own campaign close.
So I'm hoping that there's one of the general vice presidents that might be considered, and we don't seem to hear too much about the way they're thinking and acting so much, because it's all about Ted and his circle of counsel. But if it's an African guy who's been in America a long time, and I think there are a few of them in the vice presidency role, in the general vice presidents, then I think that things could change, and more dialogue could be acceptable. And the other thing to say is that Ted these days is very, very much control, very much in batting against the right wing of the church, theologically, as well as the left wing. So he seems to get worried about Conrad Vine and about Ron Kelly. I think the Michigan Conference is just a stooge as far as that's concerned. And I think they have some things to learn about ADRA and about how they shouldn't be so hand in glove with the US government and in their funding, and other governments as well. But they ought to generate their own funds some way or another. But and as I suggested in my original interview 5 years ago, I think if we're ever to achieve any progress as far as ordination, the ordination issue is concerned, we need to start educating our people. We can't hope to make a global decision together if we aren't on a level playing field to a greater degree than we are now.
You see, I agree with you 100% on that. Education, talking about it, having the dialogue. But all I see from the liberal progressives, revisionists, big tent, gospel Adventists
Mhm.
are statements of, oh, I don't think he's going to get back in. We'll be right. We need to do this, this, and this. But I see no demonstrable, there's no evidence to suggest they are actually doing anything. Like with your dad's movement,
Mhm.
they had letters like this. This is like a 13-page document or something. They were so effective that the Ted Wilsons of today, the Doug Batchelors of today, the David Ashericks, the more conservative fundamental Adventists have a huge debt to pay to your dad. Their movement was hugely successful. I believe that the progressive liberal revisionist big tent gospel Adventist liberals have a valid claim to some kind of version of Adventism. And of course, everyone can have a version of Adventism they want. But I'm talking about the official collective. So I see these guys saying, oh, Ted's not going to get in, or that won't happen, or this won't happen. And we need to do this. But no one appears to be doing anything. And when I ask people to come on, and that are pastors, that are leaders, come on the show and share the positive things you are doing to bring about and promote the gospel Adventist movement, a deeper focus on the biblical aspects, the focus on Jesus, they won't come on because A, I don't believe they're doing anything anyway of an organized level, and B, I don't think they want to upset the Ted Wilsons of the world. And so I'm just shocked that people don't see this. Why am I the only one seeing this? That the liberal, progressive, revisionist, big tent, gospel Adventists, cultural Adventists, they have this sense of hope that doesn't seem to be justified with any action. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, to a certain extent, I agree. Well, one thing to be said is that conservative Adventists almost always, the ones who have any influence at all, are uh, supporting the church financially. Whereas these cultural Adventists and liberal Adventists may do and may not do, or according to their own wishes. But so I believe the Lord.
But is it just money? Like, I point me to one liberal, cultural, Adventist, progressive movement. They love going, hey, we focus on Jesus and we love community, and that's good. But it's like there's a big fish tank and there's goldfish in it, and there's a more aggressive kind of fish at the other corner, and those fish are growing and growing and growing, and the others are going, it's okay, it's going to change, and they're not doing anything about it, and the darkness is growing and brewing, and the Ted Wilson politicians are maneuvering and taking over. I guess I'm trying to work out why so positive. Like, are the cultural Adventists, like you're about to say, well, we're leaving this to Jesus? Your father never said that. He loved Jesus. He left things to Jesus, but he and your mother were action people. I just don't see the progressive liberals as being action people. They're all talk.
And I illustrated that by talking about their financial contributions to the church.
As in, the progressives have less contributions than the more conservative?
Yeah, the progressives make
lack
less
of action.
contribution.
Lack of action.
Lack of action, yeah. And
weak.
they'll come out with Spectrum, and they'll come out with Adventist Today and everything else, but that's all talk and no action, really.
And I say this to you because I see you as a person of action. I've read a lot of your stuff in the past, and it's very affirmative. It's action oriented. I'm just saying there's no one pulling together the Peter Marxes. There's no one having some sense of cohesion that this needs to be addressed. Leadership is just kind of letting it, no one wants to talk about Conrad Vine and no one wants to talk about Desmond Ford, and hey, let's just focus on our local church and everything's going to be okay. The reality is the church has been at a significant crossroads for 45 years and just seems to have its head in the sand. The progressive liberals, I mean.
Well,
so I'm not, it's a difficult one because most of my friends are these progressive liberals, cultural Adventists, and I love what a lot of people do individually and behind the scenes, but I just don't get where they're this incredible hope they have. It's a naive, ignorant kind of hope. And then this lack of action makes them seem so weak.
you've really highlighted something I've never thought about before too much, in that this CB movement, if we like that term, and I don't really. This CB movement began with men of action.
Yeah, they
Men
weren't
who
weak.
yeah, they didn't take no for an answer, and then of course the division here was very much not listening to them, as my father illustrated, and then all of a sudden, when they sensed the way the General Conference was thinking and the wider Adventist community, they changed their tune dramatically overnight, basically, and started to go after Des Ford. And this is part what I don't understand, because Parmenter was very much in favor of Des until he wasn't, and then he was very much against him.
Yes.
And Athol Tollos the same. That they were happy to listen to him until the world filled, the Adventist scholarship came through a little more. Well, that's the way life is.
Yeah. And I certainly hope you're not taking that as a personal criticism to you. I see you as one of the good guys, and I see you as someone that's raised, two incredible daughters and had a loving marriage, and you sort of are a great example for people. So I'm just talking collectively about this progressive movement. The collective movement of the CBs was strong. Where's the strength in the progressives? Collectively, they're as weak as water, with lots of tree hugging going on, and let's talk about Jesus, and they think they're keeping their local churches great as long as they talk about Jesus and it's all good news and haystacks. But the reality is there's a thing happening within the Adventist churches is creeping further and further, deeper and deeper, down and down into the grassroots, and it's a legalistic aspect that it concerns me. That's the only reason I'm still here 5 years later. I'm concerned about this. No one's talking about it.
Well, you should come and join us again and talk from the inside.
I've had more impact on the outside than the inside than I ever did.
Well, yeah, maybe that's true. Yeah. So, yeah, I wish Des had been able to work in better with his fellow scholars and fellow administrators. Well, the administrators. The Lord gives people different gifts, and Des had gifts in abundance. But as well as him, that there were other people who were equally gifted in all sorts of other ways,
Yeah.
and he might have had a different approach rather than imagining that this was the time things would change and that he needed to be the change agent.
Well, see,
Um,
Bill, sorry to interrupt, but Bill Johnson said that to me as well. He said, look, why I was hoping that Des would just kind of go a bit slower and let things just happen naturally, and that over years people would take on these ideas. You know, why are you drawing a line in the sand? Why are you thinking this is the moment to be very defined about your views? And he was sort of saying that Des was a bit silly to have done that. He didn't use the word silly, but that was the idea. You know, he'd wish, and I said to Bill Johnson, this was in the 40th anniversary interview, also 5 years ago. I said, well, how did that work out for you? 40 years later, how did this idea of, hey, you know, let's not push it too much and let's just happen it all organically, and I'd suggest that 5 years on now, it's worked. It's demonstrably even worked out worse for people that felt Des should have just gone a bit lighter and slower. He needed to draw a line in the sand, and he did. And to me, it proved that the church can never change. It proved that the DNA of Adventism is legalistic. It is last generation theology. Ellen White has many, many, many quotes to support that. And it's all about getting ready for Jesus, and how do you get ready, and the close of probation, and standing without a mediator. It's a sales funnel to legalism, and those who have the better version of Adventism, like yourself, Ruth-Ellen, Wendy, there's this kind of optimism that seems to just happily and merrily float along with all sorts of thoughts of how things can be done and what could be done better and what should have. Someone like Des said, nah, here's a line in the sand. You guys are wrong. Ellen White is wrong on this. And he loved Ellen White. And your dad went, yeah, and we don't agree with what Des said. Because Des spoke clearly and honestly, your dad was able to go, oh, this is what you're saying. Well, we don't agree with that. That's not our Adventism. That's not official Adventism. That is not the Adventism that we know and love. And so he stood up and reacted to that. Because of Des's defined strength, your dad's defined strength, two opposing sides were able to nut it out. So leadership, instead of letting it be nutted out on the actual grassroots realm, kicked Des out.
I'd like to ask you a question at this point about Des and about his theology. If there'd been a different outcome with Des in 1979 and 1980, and the church had officially accepted that really the doctrine of the investigative judgment wasn't in the scripture, where would we be today?
Very good question. And that allows me the chance to say, Des and Adventism do not gel. It would not have worked. If Des had stayed and been allowed to continue to undermine the authority of Ellen G. White by saying, oh, so God told you this, but we don't agree with it biblically. At some point, someone was going to put two and two together and say, oh, hang on, he may not call her a false prophet, but wow, if she said God told her 1844 is accurate and it's not, that would have created a massive explosion in the church as well. So I am suggesting Des Ford theology would never have worked with Adventism, because your father's version of Adventism was the correct version. Now, people can, there's 25 million Adventists. Each one is allowed to have their own version of it. But if you're out there preaching, spreading the word of the church, there has to be a collective unity if you are the remnant church claiming to have a special message for these last days. And undermining Ellen White's visions on the sanctuary 2003 days doctrine is going to undermine the whole religion. So Des could not have stayed, could not have worked with it. The theology does not work with your dad's theology. There is no way you can make a Des Ford style theology, a Ray Cottrell style theology, any number of these liberal academic scholars, theologians. None of their version of Adventism is going to work with the true historic Adventism, which collectively still stands in source material, Ellen White's visions, Ellen White's writings, the main teachings of the church politically, right to the top. And you just take a cursory look at Adventism, and sure, you've got pockets of beauty and tree hugging, loving Jesus, local churches, but the majority of the Adventist church is complying with your dad's kind of Adventism. Does that answer your question?
Well, I'd like to suggest something else about the question, and that is that it's possible. I really believe this. It's possible that without saying that the Adventists have always expressed the doctrine of the investigative judgment in the best way possible, it's possible that Des was absolutely wrong in what he was suggesting. And to my mind, if the Lord was leading in any sense what happened in the church in 45 years ago, that point of view, that Des was wrong in his theology and the church was right to not have accepted it, needs to be seriously considered.
I think that the Des Ford theology is the one I more align myself to when I was an Adventist, at least. And having said that, I can comfortably embrace that theology and still say it doesn't dovetail with traditional Adventism at all. And not only does it not dovetail, this traditional Adventism, where a lot of Adventists are saying, "Oh, that's not my Adventism." Fine, that's fine. But collectively speaking, this traditional Adventism still is the tree trunk of Adventism. So any branch off it that I might embrace and be out on and enjoying Des Ford's theology way more than I enjoy M.L. Andreassen's theology, I can still say I love that, but also that it doesn't mix with the tree trunk Adventist theology. It doesn't mix. It's never going to mix. So enjoy your tree branch, or jump down from the tree and start your own thing. Be Ruth-Ellen, that it really enjoys being a light into her movement that might have darkness everywhere else. That's good. People need that. And some people shouldn't leave because their mental health would not even be able to cope with the transition. But I'm just saying the understanding, but I'm saying that for those who think it can be done, they are deluded, disingenuous, duped, or dishonest. It cannot be done. When you know it can't be done, then you can go, "Oh, I'm going to leave," or "I'm going to stay, but I'm going to be cultural," or "I'm going to enjoy Jesus and haystacks." Then you can be honest with yourself and live within Adventism, leave Adventism. There's choices that unfold to you that are very positive. But if you keep thinking it's going to change, you're hoping for change, and it's not going to change, you live in a land that creates weakness, I think, in people, and a weakness of life, and a weakness of abundance, and a lack of being able to be effective in many ways. I'm not talking about judging people's own individual decisions. I'm talking about a collective movement loses its effectiveness if it thinks it can do something it never can, as a collective.
So I think that might be a good point to leave our conversation on.
Up in the air.
Well, I've got my feet on the ground because due to my circumstances here in our retirement village, an Adventist retirement village, with Wendy the way she is, we've chosen ever since the beginning of COVID 5 years ago, almost, to meet together here, and we have a little group of about, say 14 or 16 people meeting together in our Harmony House Fellowship.
See, I love that. Are you thinking that I'm attacking that?
No. I'm just saying what I'm doing at present. That really turns me on, and I love the leadership role that I exercise here as far as our little fellowship is concerned, and I'm committed always, and I have been since the beginning of my ministry many years ago, 40 odd years ago now, not to be involved in these theological disputes, but to give my local people what I consider they need as a spiritual diet.
I think that's great, but you're not saying that these other issues aren't important and the dialogue should be had. Just because you're not wanting to doesn't mean that it's not an important thing. And
I'm happy to be engaged in dialogue, but it needs to be completely separate from what I'm doing in caring for my little flock here. So the Lord suggests that some people don't need to be involved in all sorts of disputes that other people need to settle between themselves. But
I think the reason that you find yourself here and on that side of the fence that may be a bit uncomfortable, and I definitely want this to be a positive conversation. I've got nothing of anything to criticize you at all.
Yeah.
I think you're a fine gentleman that's done incredible things that I admire and look up to. I try and copy and emulate. So I'm not trying to be negative, but by the very fact that you were born to Raglan Marx, who became part of a movement that has brought in many ways the church back to the historic roots, that puts you in this conversation. Fortunately, only once every 5 years. We'll get you back in 5 years' time.
I'm the last of the troublemakers. I'm number 7 in the family, you see.
Right. See, I was good friends with Stan. Do you remember he and I, do you remember me ever telling you that? He and I used to have some great conversations.
Yes. I'm just saying goodbye to someone in the house. Stan and your father got on very well together and appreciated each other.
I had some great spin-off conversations because of their friendship.
But as I've suggested, my family have really had a commitment. Mum and Dad and the whole family have had a commitment to Adventist education right the way through. I'm number 7 graduate of my 7 siblings, of my 6 siblings. And we're all Avondale graduates, and we're thankful for that. But
well, I guess I was just pushing down a bit there, asking you a couple of hard questions, not to challenge you or make this not a positive conversation, but I'm just interested in your insights, because no one will answer these questions for me. Why the progressives have such a positive sense of political hope when they're doing nothing to bring about any change? Why? Like, what's your thoughts on that? That's all I'm asking.
I don't have too much more to throw into the conversation.
I'll give you one last question that has been asked from the audience. We've had a few comments, and Motor Sapien says, Peter Marks, congrats on being a grandpa. I appreciate that you pointed out that Des's position is foundationally similar to Luther. Could you speak on the theological aspect more?
I'd
Is that too
prefer
much
other
of a hard
people
question for the last
other
minute?
people to do that. But as I understand it, Des is committed to a more Calvinist position, and Adventists in general are committed to a more Arminian position as far as salvation is concerned. Therefore, and I don't, and as I said in the initial interview, if you believe that way about salvation, then of course you'll reject the Adventist doctrine of the investigative judgment. It follows very much, and Des would be illogical if he hadn't come through the way he did at the end. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I appreciate the logic of his position, but it's just I question his theological perspective at the point of salvation, etc.
Hey, well, look, thank you so much for taking the time today. You've put in a really good amount of time, and I really appreciate that. All of us that have been watching really value it. And yeah, it turned out that it was actually a wonderful little positive piece of a memory there that we created. I really enjoyed it, and hearing Wendy talk about some of the approaches she has to her relationship with Jesus was lovely, and hearing Ruth-Ellen's and yours. So yeah, I won't invite you back until 5 years' time when we have the 50th anniversary of Glacier View, and we'll replay this interview and that interview, and we'll have a commentary on it. How old will you be in 5 years?
Oh, my twin brother might be 72, I think.
Hey, good to talk to you. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Frank Merendino tomorrow with our Good News Fellowship. Look forward to seeing you all then. See you, Peter.
Thank you.